I'm going to call this meeting, call this meeting of the, is this on? Okay, call this meeting of the Senate Appropriations Committee to order. Secretary, please note the roll. Without objection, the minutes of the March 19, 2024 meeting are approved as distributed. Hearing no objection, so approved. We're going to begin with House Bill, what's it? 2279.
Mr. Chair and members, the Strike Everything Amendment to House Bill 2279 in your name dated March 21st, 2024 at 11:30 a.m. establishes and outlines requirements for drug-free homeless service zones and establishes the homeless shelter and services funds to provide grants to outlined operators or providers within a drug-free homeless service zone. The Strike Everything Amendment prescribes notification requirements for mixed hotels and requires the Auditor General to conduct a special audit on programs and services for individuals experiencing homelessness. HB 2279 transfers $5.5 million from the Housing Trust Fund deposits to the OAG and the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission and appropriates $50 million from the Consumer Remediation Subaccounts to the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System to establish 5 additional secure behavioral health residential facilities for individuals experiencing homelessness and for provider support for the new facilities established. Finally, the bill defines individual experiencing homelessness, mixed hoteling, dangerous drugs, drug-free homeless service zones, homeless individual, and narcotic drugs. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No questions? Do we have the amendment explanation also?
That was the strike.
Oh, that was a strike. I'm sorry. My mistake. Okay, the sponsor is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members, for hearing this bill, Matt Gress, Legislative District 4. If there are 2 messages I want to share with you today, they are this. To the individuals and their families in our community suffering from addiction, abuse, trauma, neglect, mental illness, and yes, as a result of these symptoms, living on the streets, government at all levels has failed you. We've come at this issue with hearts full of compassion and a desire to help those who are in despair with the services and a path to a more stable life. Homelessness is a humanitarian crisis, but it's also a public safety crisis. This bill seeks to address the tragic reality of homelessness. Nationally, it's increased by 11% over the prior year, the biggest spike in history. Housing stock and evictions are certainly a part of that impact, but our elected leaders for too long seem to think that having government give people housing will make everything better. For years, our government has pursued a housing-first strategy. And for those of you who don't know what that terminology means, Housing First provides individuals experiencing homelessness with shelter first, even if they suffer from drug addiction or mental illness. This may seem like the compassionate thing to do, but Housing First goes further than that. There is no requirement to participate in treatment, and sobriety is voluntary. That's not compassion or engagement. That's enablement and does nothing to lift people out of misery. Look no further than California, the poster child of failed public policy. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that California has spent more than $20 billion on housing for the homeless since 2020. The result? There are more public encampments today than ever before. In San Francisco, their homeless budget has ballooned to $672 million, up from $224 million in 2016. California is trying to spin their way out of this failure, but without addressing the root causes of the problem, matters will only get worse. Here in Arizona, the Common Sense Institute of Arizona reported last year that we spent $1 billion on homelessness. And when you look at the per capita amount spent, we're looking at about $47,000 spent per capita on those experiencing homelessness. And yet homelessness has continued to increase, mortality has grown, and we know that 81% of all the deaths in Maricopa County, according to the medical examiner's office, were due to drug-related issues. Arizonans know what needs to be done. In a recent poll, 74% of Arizonans believe that homelessness is getting worse, and a majority of those surveyed in another poll believe that substance abuse recovery programs are needed. We believe that a treatment-first approach is the most appropriate. So this bill holds those who are going to deal drugs or do drugs or possess drugs inside of places that should be of refuge, shelters, organizations providing primarily services to those who are homeless, as a safe haven, not a drug-infested den of despair. And we're going to need the help of our provider community. If you knowingly violate a policy that prohibits the use or possession of drugs within a homelessness service zone, then you could be guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. That's beyond the pale of what we expect of our social service providers. And for those who have violated that policy, we've heard from the very same providers that they would get fired. I think they should get more than just fired. They should be liable for criminal activity. This bill also includes $50 million, and Representative Barbara Parker has been a major champion of this, for secure behavioral health residential treatment facilities. The Mad Moms are here. We heard in a committee hearing that individuals who are suffering from mental illness and are committing or who are a danger to themselves or others, there's no place for them to go. We have no secure behavioral health residential facilities, even though the judges are directed to send individuals to these very facilities. This bill will create them and create the rates that will support the operations of these facilities using the opioid epidemic fund that Attorney General Chris Mays has been given by the legislature. This bans mixed hoteling, so we don't think it's a good policy to put those who are homeless in a same facility that's operating to the general public for hotels. It's not a good recipe for disaster, or recipe for success. And in fact, City of Phoenix says it is not their policy to place people who are homeless into hotels, unless it's one-off situations of those families or those who are suffering from or fleeing from domestic violence. And yet we have another city saying, let's just rent out all the blocks of rooms and put homeless people there so that we don't have to see them on the streets. That's warehousing. That's not help or hope. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving us an opportunity to hear this bill, and happy to take any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Questions?
I'll start with him.
Okay.
You can start with him.
You can start. Go ahead.
No, I'll start with you.
Senator
Please,
Bentley,
it's my
go
pleasure.
first. All right, let's go. Senator Kern, go ahead.
Yeah, couple questions. You mentioned the opioid funds. Attorney General Mays has said she's not going to give up the opioid funds, and she's threatened lawsuit against the governor and the legislature regarding the opioid funds. Will this kind of move her forward in that lawsuit, and what would we do if that happens? Just wait for the courts to decide, or what?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kern, the legislature has the exclusive power of the purse. Attorney General Mays has no legal authority to spend those dollars unless they're subject to legislative appropriation. So I think she's going to have a hard time making that case that she can do whatever she wants with these opioid settlement funds. She's bound by law to ensure that those dollars are subject to appropriation. So I think she'll have a bit of a challenge. I think this is using these dollars in the appropriate way possible.
So to that point, Mr. Chair, so should she win, what is the next, plan B do we have?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kern, we'd have to cross that road when we get there. If she has the ability to spend carte blanche these settlement funds, I think it opens up a completely new dimension where attorneys general in the future can negotiate settlements and create terms in those settlements that essentially bypass two other branches of government. I think that would be quite unprecedented, and so the courts are going to have to look carefully at the implications of her.
So, Mr. Chair, to that
contention.
point, I mean, if she thinks she could win the lawsuit, you know, why would she threaten it if she didn't think she could win? And my question is just, what is the plan B? Because I don't want us coming back here next session and saying, well, we lost that lawsuit, now it's time for the taxpayers to pony up.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kern, the bill as it stands appropriates dollars from the consumer remediation subaccount. Our intention is to use those dollars. If General Mays does not make those dollars available and decides to sue us and prevails in court, then we would have to go back to the drawing table to figure out where we would get those dollars. Because right now the general fund is closed. We don't have money in the general fund right now to allocate. So we would go back to we'd have to go back to the drawing board from step one.
Okay.
I'm sure the AG appreciates your calling her General Mace.
Right. So, Mr. Chair, one last question. You mentioned there was a figure that you mentioned, and I forget what group said that a lot of homelessness is caused by drug abuse. I don't know if it was 84% or whatever you had mentioned in your speech. Yet the bill is, and I you know, I'm in favor of what you're trying to do, but I just have some questions. We're not fixing the actual problem here, in my opinion. If you look here in 2023, over 1.1 billion doses of fentanyl came across our southern border. 1.1 billion. Those are sold at a Circle K for 50 cents a pill. So if you don't fix that problem, you're never going to fix the homelessness problem. I know that, you know, there's angst about securing our border. The Republicans say secure it. The Democrats say let the illegals cross, let the drugs cross. You know, we're just going to turn our back. Again, I'm hesitant to continue to put money and time and effort into government when we don't actually address the real problem, which is the fentanyl crisis.
Okay.
What are your
Ms.
thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kern, the money in this bill will go to three places. One, $5 million to the Auditor General to conduct an audit of federal, state, and local spending, including performance reviews of programs that are serving those who are homeless. Are people getting sober if they have addiction problems? If they have mental illness, are they getting treatment and staying on that treatment? Did they get a job? If they needed educational services, did they get them? Did they find stable housing for at least 3 years after they leave a shelter and those services? These are people-centric metrics that I do not believe are being captured. In my evaluation of some of these homelessness contracts, it's been about how many beds did we fill per night? Did we update the electronic health management information system for individuals who are experiencing homelessness 95% of the time? And did we find someone permanent supportive housing, but then we stopped tracking how long they stayed in that supportive housing? Those are system metrics that may have some relevance here, but they miss the person who we need to help. $5 million for the Auditor General to do that. $500,000 to the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission to begin collecting data from law enforcement agencies on crimes committed by those who are homeless and crimes committed against those who are homeless. Many other jurisdictions throughout the country track this information. We should be as well. And then also tracking overdoses of those who are homeless and deaths from overdoses. I think we need to get a better handle around that so our healthcare institutions are aware of what's happening. And then $50 million for 5 secure behavioral health residential facilities. We don't have any of these in the state. This could be a huge game changer for those suffering from mental illness.
Okay, thank you for answering his last question. Senator Fernandez?
Thank you. How many beds would that be for those 5 facilities?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, it will depend between 20 and 30 beds per facility.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, is there any indication that we need, like numbers of that we need? I believe that we need them, but do we know how many we need?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, we need a lot of beds. Just take a look at the 55-bed cap at the Arizona State Hospital. We have the cap because of the Arnold v. Sarn litigation, but we know that we have thousands of individuals suffering from severe mental illness, and many are a danger to themselves and to others. Many are languishing right now in hospitals because we're trying to find a bed for them in a safe place. So this will be a step in the right direction, but we'll still need to do more even after this.
Okay, Mr. Chair, regarding the reversing the housing first policy, can you talk about any other state that might have done this and seen some success to have not providing housing before to an addicted person?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, we'll have some experts here that can talk about what they've seen on a national level that can highlight the successes elsewhere with the treatment first model.
And Mr. Chair, do you worry that we're going to see more people on the streets that may not want to seek care because they may not want to give up? And I mean, a big problem right now with homelessness is also not just the homeless people, which is a huge problem, but also the appearance of homeless people in neighborhoods. And I think that's where a lot of people get concerned. Are you worried that we're going to see more of that because people won't want to seek care if they think that they're going to be not be able to continue their drug addictions?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, if you're going to a homelessness facility to continue doing drugs and potentially dealing drugs to other vulnerable individuals, we don't want you at that center. We want you to come and avail yourself of treatment, of sobriety. We want you to begin making progress. But if you're going to come and continue to lean into your addiction and capture and snare other people who are trying to escape addiction, then no, we don't want you there. And if you're going to be out on the streets and there are vacant shelter beds, you can be arrested. And then you can get the treatment you need inside of jail. You're going to get treatment one way or the other, but we're not going to just put you in a shelter so that we don't have to see you on the corner. That's not the way I think we should go about helping people who are homeless.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would argue that the folks that are going to these places, they don't go there with the intention of infecting others with their addictions. They go there because they need a place to stay. If it's hot, if it's, for whatever reason, maybe if it's cold. It doesn't happen very often in Arizona, but it does happen. And they're seeking care. So I don't think that they're going there with the intention of like, here are some new people that I can, obstruct's the wrong word, corrupt maybe. I think that's my big point with that. But as far as that brings me to the next question, which is how many of these facilities currently don't already have a no drug policy? I mean, is it a significant number?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, my understanding from all the stakeholders is that they don't allow drugs on their campus. So this should be easy for them to comply with. This is just giving additional tools to law enforcement to hold those who are accountable, who are dealing, using, or possessing drugs within these facilities.
But Mr. Chair, what is this doing that the tools that they don't already have?
Well, what Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, this will designate physical zones that can give the tools and resources to law enforcement officers to protect those areas. It also can be a deterrent. I mean, we saw with drug-free school zones, many of them were adopted back in the 80s. It did result in a reduction of drug crimes happening in those zones. We would expect it. Now, I share your feeling that many who come to these homeless shelters are trying to get away from drugs. However, the sad reality is that these are target-rich environments for dealers and for users. A target-rich environment. You could talk to a lot of addicts and they'll tell you that they were either propositioned for drugs or asked for drugs at these facilities. Windermere and Mesa, the addicts all know where they can go to get drugs. Go to Windermere. And it's a sad reality that we need to put it into.
But Mr. Chair, I won't go to Windermere, but I'm just wondering about what is it that the police, so can't the police already arrest that person at Windermere, for example? If I go to Windermere tomorrow and I'm offered drugs, wouldn't they be able to arrest that person currently? And so what difference would this make?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, this would put a penalty enhancement on that. It would also require signage, and it would also require those facilities to adopt a formal policy regarding drug use or possession. That's something that we need to see in these homeless services providers. And I think that there are some who come onto campus and they are clearly inebriated and intoxicated. And employees have shared with me that they look the other way. They'll sleep it off next day and they'll start all over again. That is a cycle bound to failure, and we have to put an end to it.
But Mr. Chair, if the policy already exists, then what's the point? I mean, like, why would this change things from the center's point of view? If the policy already exists, they're already saying no drugs or no alcohol or whatever that looks like, and we enact this, what's to say that they're going to do anything different?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, it would put a criminal penalty on the part of the staff who knowingly violated that policy. It's similar to other positions of trust. I view those who are helping people who are homeless at these facilities as people in positions of trust. Suppose a teacher at a school knowingly allowed a kid to do drugs or possess drugs and turn the other way, and turns out that the student got arrested and said that the teacher was in on this in some way or knew about it, that teacher would be suspended potentially, and charges would likely be brought against the teacher for enabling an unsafe environment. We need all hands on deck to help us with this epidemic.
Okay, I'm ready to listen to experts.
That's it?
Yeah.
Done? Okay, any other questions? All right, no questions. All right, so we have a lot of bills, and we have a lot of speakers, especially on this bill. So the good news is everybody gets to speak who signed up. The bad news is it's an elevated speech, and we're a 12-story building, so it's 90 seconds. So let's get going.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we've got Stephanie, and I'm not even going to try it. Bohalja? Maybe I will try it. Bohyla. All right, ma'am, state your name for the record. You've got 90 seconds.
Stephanie Buhyla. I'm here to talk about the polling that Cicero Institute has conducted on this particular provision. It's a bipartisan issue. There really isn't contention among the electorate when it comes to addressing homelessness. There's been a lot of polarization in the media at the political level that is really unwarranted. So in Arizona, we found that 94% of individuals say that homelessness is either staying the same or increasing. That includes 64% of Democrats, 77% of independents. 67% of individuals, of likely voters, are avoiding tourist areas, so downtown areas, because of the homelessness, drug dealing, you name it, that comes with that. So impacting businesses, and they see homeless encampments as a threat to public safety, 73%. And this is a shocking number, 93% of likely voters say that homeless individuals should not just be able to camp wherever they want. And that's where this bill comes in. It allows law enforcement some tools to help redirect individuals into services. And that 93%, that's 94% of Democrats, 93% of the GOP. So Democrats are actually more supportive of helping these folks get redirected into services. This isn't just work for me. This is personal. I have a niece who's been homeless and addicted in Phoenix. Been through a lot of trauma, and she needs help. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Ian Linson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. My name is Ian Linson. I'm from the city of Mesa, where the Windermere is located. We are respectfully opposed to this bill. We definitely appreciate the topic of homelessness, though, being addressed and discussed here. It is a top priority for the city. Unfortunately, we believe if this bill were to be enacted, it would actually lead to more folks being on the street and would actually reduce our ability to provide services to those who are looking for it. Because we do rent rooms at a hotel at the Windermere, we rent the entire complex except for a separate complex of a few rooms that are open to the general public. we would no longer be able to do that, and so there would be some folks there that we could not provide services for. We are in the process, though, of purchasing our own hotel, but we committed to the Mesa residents who would be going there, and this bill would not include single individuals, so we would still need a place for those folks to go. Our program has been highly successful. We've helped over 1,700 people find housing over the last 3.5 years or so. So obviously would like to continue with that program. Would respectfully ask that you vote no. Thanks.
All right, nice job. Okay, next we have Luis Acosta.
Thank you so much. Chairman Kavanaugh, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Luis Acosta, and I'm here representing Quick Trip, the convenience store. We are in support of this piece of legislation with over 115 stores and more than 3,000 employees across the state of Arizona. We feel like our employees and our stores are on the front lines of this critical issue. We understand that Mr. Gress is working with a group of stakeholders and is working with a group of a bipartisan group of legislators in order to take this bill to the next level, and that by passing it today, you're allowing that conversation to continue. Our hope is that by having these conversations, the bill evolves and gets to a point where I think everybody can come together to help us solve this issue. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Nicole Newhouse.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Nicole Newhouse, the Executive Director of the Arizona Housing Coalition, and I'm here to express our opposition to the Strike Everything House Bill 2279. While we recognize the sponsor's intent to tackle the pressing issue of homelessness in Arizona, we believe the bill as it stands presents several concerns. Firstly, while aiming to establish a drug-free homeless services zone, the bill's punitive approach, though imposing additional criminal penalties for drug-related violations, may inadvertently worsen the vulnerabilities of homeless individuals. We must consider if punitive measures effectively combat homelessness or merely shift the burden to the judicial system, worsening the issue and draining state resources further. Furthermore, the bill lacks clarity regarding enforcement mechanisms for homeless service providers. Coalition members have shared their concerns regarding the practicality and the effectiveness of enforcing such regulations. Without clear guidelines, there's a risk of unintended consequences and potential misuse of law enforcement resources. Additionally, the ban on publicly funded mixed hoteling and requirement for signage in hotels housing unhoused individuals could inadvertently limit non-congregate shelter options, reducing available accommodation for those in need, including for homeless veterans who are often placed in operating hotels across the state for short stays until more permanent arrangements are finalized. Moreover, while promoting transparency and accountability is commendable, the bill's mandate to track external, sometimes HIPAA-protected outcomes poses challenges for individual service providers. A more effective approach would involve state-level performance metrics.
Please close.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you about the sponsor mentioned that if someone doesn't give up their addiction and they're on the, and that terminology might be wrong, forgive me, and they aren't able to get housing, and then he said that the police would arrest them and they would get the treatment they would need in jail or prison or whatever else. In your experience, does that happen? Do you see a lot of people that get arrested, get treatment, and then become productive member of society?
I would say no. I would also say that most of the time, if a homeless service provider were to look out and see someone doing drugs, and they picked up the phone and they called law enforcement, by the time that law enforcement arrives, the drug use is probably done. And so the law enforcement person is looking, and either the person is still there or they're laying down, and so no crime exists because they can't see it. So these are not necessary. There is no proven, there's nothing that indicates that these folks would end up in jail. But were they to go to jail, they'd end up in the system. There's not much in the way of treatment, and then they would end up back out on the street, still homeless and still addicted.
Okay. Next up, Jessica Cruz.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jessica Cruz, and I'm here on behalf of Native American Connections, where I serve as the Director of Homeless Housing Services. I'm here today in respectful opposition of the Strike Everything bill. We appreciate the bill's sponsor's noble intentions and his dedication to addressing critical issues of homelessness in our state. We look forward to the continued opportunity to continue to work with Representative Gress and other members to providers to address both housing shortage and the need for services to the homeless population in our state. Native American Connections has served the community for over 50 years. NAC has worked to address the needs in our community members, particularly those who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. I will keep my comments brief and address one specific point of concern. While we acknowledge the importance of accountability in improving our outcome for our clients, we must ensure that any legislation reflects the practical realities and complexities of our work. Specifically, I want to draw to attention the provisions outlined in the Homeless Shelter and Services Grant Program established on page 6 of the bill. One significant concern we have is the requirement for service providers to track individuals for 3 years after they've received services. Service providers have no way of tracking previous clients or collect information about their housing or employment status, sobriety, or instances of returning to homelessness. The resources, infrastructure required to meet the tracking requirements outlined in the program presents significant challenges for organizations like ours. We urge policymakers to consider these complexities and nuances.
Thank you.
All right, we have, looks like Aaron Marquez.
Thank you, Senators. Mr. Chair, my name is Aaron Marquez. I'm an Afghanistan war veteran and the executive director of a group called Vets Forward. We're a coalition of veterans and military families across Arizona. We're here to ask you to oppose and vote no on this bill. We understand the importance of providing an environment free of drugs to promote the safety and rehabilitation of homeless individuals engaged in housing and treatment services. However, we are concerned that this legislation would deter homeless individuals from seeking adequate housing when addicted to drugs for fear of criminal punishment. Unfortunately, relapse is often a feature of recovery and occurs regularly when homeless individuals attempt to recover from drug addiction. Housing of the homeless should be the priority to ensure they are in a safe environment where they can begin the process of healing without the fear of criminalizing relapse. We're reaching out to you as veterans to urge you to vote no. The proposals in this bill could inadvertently criminalize veterans who are struggling with homelessness by enforcing stringent drug-free zones and imposing penalties for violations. This bill risks punishing veterans who are most in need of our support, not criminal sanctions. Many of our veterans experiencing homelessness are grappling with challenges such as substance abuse, mental health, and the daunting task of reintegration into civilian life. Instead of offering them the help they need, this bill threatens to push them further to the margins of society. The bill's emphasis on performance-based funding could also undermine the provisions of comprehensive and empathetic services for homeless veterans. Service providers may be compelled to focus on short-term outcomes over the essential holistic care that truly addresses underlying causes of veteran homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Devin Cruz. It's spelled, yeah, it's written Cruz, but sure.
I'm Devin Kurtz. I'm the Director of Public Safety Policy at the Cicero Institute. I want to touch on a couple of topics, namely that housing is the root cause of homelessness. There was a study by the University of California at San Francisco that it was the largest study of homelessness in America, came out in June of last year. Only 4% of respondents cited housing as the primary reason that they're homeless. That was about half the rate of substance abuse alone. And this maps on to what's happening in Arizona. In the last 10 years, you've seen a 150% rise in chronic substance abuse among unsheltered homeless people, a doubling of severe mental illness. This bill tries to tackle those root causes through the secure mental health facilities and the drug-free homeless service zones, which I'd like to clarify. The language there targets two primary populations: drug dealers in homeless shelters, so people who are preying upon the vulnerable, not the homeless individuals themselves. There are no sentence enhancements for them. Still is illegal. However, this bill does not enhance those penalties. So it's enhanced penalties for the dealers and then also for the providers who turn the other way. There's a harm reduction mandate through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which funds many of these organizations, preventing them within their own internal policies from evicting people who are openly using substances or are not sober. It also prevents them from prioritizing treatment. This bill is a way to push back against that at the state level by making sure that these organizations are addressing the root causes, not making it worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Rose's
All
name.
right, we've got two more. We've got Amy Schwabenlender. I got that somewhere close.
Some extra letters, that's okay. Amy Schwabenlender, CEO, Keys to Change, formerly known as Human Services Campus. We're the owner and operator of the Key Campus, as well as providing regional solutions to address homelessness across Maricopa County. We appreciate the Senate and the House looking for ways to fund additional services for people experiencing homelessness and to create more housing options. We do have concerns with this bill. We sent an email to each of you yesterday, so I'm not going to go through everything in my less than 90 seconds now, and I won't repeat some of what was said. As Nicole Newhouse mentioned, the requirement for employers to possibly report their own employees encroaches on our ability to enforce our own policies, which we do terminate employees if they are supporting or encouraging drug use in any of our programs. And we haven't heard law enforcement ask for such a tool. As it was also described, arresting someone for drug usage usually goes nowhere because the drugs are gone, and the county attorney often can't prosecute those accusations. In Section 3, holding a grant recipient accountable through reporting and metrics, we provide a lot of metrics to all of our funders. HUD, as mentioned, requires a lot of information. We do not have the ability to track as requested people for 3 years after they receive an emergency shelter service or other homeless service. We don't have a system that follows them where they go, and they don't have to report to us their sobriety, employment, or any type of housing status. I think there is some confusion on what intervention is funded and where metrics go. Permanent supportive housing is funded by HUD, has ongoing metrics that look at housing retention and employment, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Okay, thank
All
you.
right, last speaker, Rachel Strife.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Rachel Strife. I am the organizer of the Arizona Mad Moms. For the record, we are opposed to the bill, sadly, the way that it's currently written. It will cause more harm to serious mental illness than it will help. The last place that anyone with an SMI condition should land is in jail. There is not good treatment for serious mental illness in jail. We really appreciate Representative Gress for bringing this bill together and trying to help. However, it's not going to help SMI the way that we want it to. That said, there's a very important appropriation in this bill, and that is for the secure behavioral health residential facilities that our community is desperate for. There are sick people suffering, and we have no place to send them. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, especially Senator Fernandez, on those bed count numbers that we need.
Okay, thank you very much. That's that it?
That's it.
All right, that's good. Let's move the bill. Oh, does the sponsor want to do a little follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really do appreciate you having this conversation because it needs to be had. And at the end of the day, what I've heard from those who oppose the bill is that they pushed back against additional reporting requirements for how the monies are being spent and how what kind of outcomes are occurring. That is one of the biggest problems we're having in the homelessness provider space. Everybody is pointing the finger at another provider. It's someone else's responsibility to figure out whether people are getting sober or getting treatment for mental illness or getting a job or getting their education or finding housing. It's not our responsibility. We already provided one unit of service. They're out the door, on with whatever they want to do. There has to be accountability brought in on all providers working in this space. All have culpability. And if we're talking about a holistic approach here, it means that there needs to be better data sharing among all of these providers. The second is that we should expect sobriety if you're going to go and get help. And we can provide you treatment. It should not be optional. And yet, it seems whether you're a veteran or a single mom or a senior, if you are addicted to drugs, we need to get you treatment. And if you don't want treatment, then we'll have to resort to other remedies, because people who are smoking fentanyl are not rational actors or are hooked on meth. They're not making the best decisions for themselves. So that requires all of us to come together and recognize that we will need to step in and provide appropriate interventions. Until our homelessness service providers recognize the reality that homelessness and not living in a stable house permanently is a symptom of a larger problem, which is namely addiction and mental illness, you are not going to find bipartisan support in your effort. You have to recognize that addiction and mental illness need to be dealt with, not cast aside as some mean-spirited talking point that some people have brought up about this situation. It is a real epidemic, and continuing to ignore it will only make matters worse, not better. I encourage you to pass this bill, continue the conversation, and send a clear message to the executive that we need resolution on homelessness, that it's going to require treatment-first strategies if we will make progress. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Of the sponsor?
Yeah.
Good.
Thanks. So I'm just wondering, I think in years past we actually had appropriations that we tried to do for these residential support these facilities. I think even under GC administration, possibly when you were there. Why didn't we build them before? Why has this not ever been a priority?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, we did include funding for this effort. I believe the monies were swept or reverted, and I think it has to be a priority. But, the statute of limitations on the prior administration have passed. I think it's really important to be focused on what's before us, what opportunities we have, and that includes this legislation 2279. I think it's an important step in the right direction.
And in the spirit of that tone, let's have a motion.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I move HB 2279 with due pass recommendation. I also move the strike everything amendment in Senator Kavanaugh in your name, dated March 21st, 2024 at 11:30 a.m. be adopted.
Members, the question before is the adoption of the striker amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I move HB 2279 as amended, receive a due pass recommendation.
Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Alston?
No.
Senator Bennett?
Aye.
Senator Diaz? Nay. Senator Farnsworth?
Mr. Chairman, may I explain my vote?
You may.
Thank you. On Friday, I went to MD Anderson Cancer Center for more testing. I took one of those PET scans where they shoot in the radioactive sugar because cancer has a love affair with sugar. So anyway, after that, I went across the street, down the street to Circle K to buy some water, special water there, and I ran across Don, who is a homeless individual. And I've been looking forward to talking to a homeless person to really get their side of the story, and he wasn't real trusting in the beginning. We ended up spending about an hour. His name is Don, and it's that Circle K is at 5202 East Baseline Road, so if anyone knows Don, I gave him my card and I invited him to come down and testify in the Senate. I thought it would be of value. I had a fairly easy time gaining his trust as I explained to him of the time that I was homeless because of mental illness, and the time when I went to Value Options, which used to be the provider, and asked them to keep me there because I knew I was in trouble. They evaluated me and decided I was not serious enough to keep, and so I went up to Seattle where I had some siblings up there and spent about 6 weeks sitting in a park north of Seattle. There's a big park there with a lake with a sidewalk around it. Anyway, I sat there and healed, had my briefcase so in my good times I could pay my bills from some rentals I had in Arizona. Anyway, the point is, I talked to Don and I said, how did you become homeless? And we talked for a while and he said, well, I used to have an apartment, but they raised the rent and I couldn't pay the rent, so I moved out, but I still had my car. I was living in my car, and I knew enough to move the car around, so because if you park in one place, you get in trouble. And then I had a flat tire. Unfortunately, I didn't have a spare, and so didn't have much money. I was trying to figure out how I could get my tire replaced. And while I was gone, they towed my car, and I've been homeless ever since. So I know this is an imperfect bill, but I hope it'll help, and I vote aye.
No.
Permission, sir?
You may.
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions. I did not know which department we were talking about in here. I did ask the sponsor. It's apparently Access. It's going to be overseeing some of this. I would like to be more specific. And there's several areas in this bill that I would like to see the word may taken out and shall put in. And I'd like to talk to you about that because we know what those two words, they mean. They're very different. And when you put may regarding a state agency, it usually doesn't get done. So I'd like to see some of those changed. And with that, I vote aye.
Aye. Senator Mendez?
No.
Senator Hoffman?
I don't love the bill. I don't. I'll give you a pass for now, but I'm going to want to work with you like Mr. Kern wants to from the floor. So I'll be a yes today.
Senator Hoffman?
Aye.
6 ayes, 4 noes, 0 not voting.
Members, by your vote is 6 ayes, 4 noes, 0 not voting. You have given House Bill 2279 as amended a due pass recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
All right, I've been ordering these as members came in, or at least as I spied them. So we'll be doing 2494, and then HCR 2058, and then 2449, and then 2326, and then 2024. So 2494.
Mr. Chair and members, House Bill 2494 appropriates $100,000 and 1 FTE from the Board of Nursing Fund to the Arizona Board of Nursing in fiscal year 2025 to issue expedited licenses or certificates to out-of-state registered nurses and advanced practice registered nurses as outlined. An APRN or RN must meet certain conditions to be granted an expedited license, including but not limited to holding a license or certificate in good standing in at least one other state or territory, not having a license or certificate revoked or voluntarily surrendered, physically working in Arizona or having an offer of physical employment in Arizona, and providing proof of a federal criminal background check already completed by another state or territory's licensing entity. The AZBN must issue a notice of approval as well as a license or certificate to an out-of-state APRN or RN within 5 business days of receiving the person's application and fees, or if the person is not eligible for expedited licensure, then the AZBN must provide a written explanation of reasons why the person is ineligible. All disciplinary, complaint, or investigatory actions against an applicant's license in a different state must be resolved before the AZBN may issue or deny an expedited license or certificate, and an expedited license or certificate is only valid in Arizona. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff? None. The sponsor, please.
Thank you, Senators. For the record, Selena Bliss from LD1. And I think it's important as legislators we start with our legislative intent. In other words, why did we take on this particular bill? For me, I'm a licensee. I will have been a registered nurse now for 40 years this summer. And I taught at a community college in the nursing program for 27 of those last 40 years concurrently. And we have room for improvement when it comes to licensing nurses that come to us from out of state. So what this bill does is it provides for safe and practical expedited licensure for our out-of-state nurses who are in good standing and come to Arizona to work in our high-demand nursing workforce arena. I don't know about you, but LD1, we've got a higher than normal demographic when it comes to age, so we certainly have our healthcare needs. The reason this bill is necessary, it's been identified that out-of-state advanced practice nurses can experience a 3+ month delay in processing their applications for licensure in Arizona. This is unacceptable considering the nursing shortage for those that are sitting here as providers ready to go to work. So what this bill does, that in one sentence, this bill does not have a general fund impact, but instead it appropriates for an FTE from existing nursing board funds. So they already have the funds. They just need our blessing to go forward and use them in a manner that'll expedite licensing. We did do an HHS committee amendment. I was pretty excited about this. I forgot to mention it last committee. that will waive licensure fees for spouses of active military members and military veterans or who are nurses. And we should have one speaker that signed in, Kathy Busby, who's our subject matter expert. But with that, I stand for questions.
Questions, the sponsor?
Thank you.
No? Okay. We have
Kathy.
Kathy. And we have one other speaker, so you can do 2 minutes each.
Mr.
Oh,
Chairman,
that
members of the committee,
Oh, you're
Kathy
right. Go
Busby
ahead.
on behalf of the Arizona Nurses Association, here in support of the bill. Thank you for hearing it. I'll be very brief, as Representative Bliss described this very well. Essentially, this is allowing us to get nurses who want to come from other states, RNs and APRNs, in here more quickly instead of spending months while the board checks transcripts and things. This is a kind of furthering what the universal licensing, which we did several years ago, and President Peterson sponsored that. This, as she mentioned, we've put in all the safeguards so they can check online. There's a national service nurses, and it'll show the disciplinary history, the licensure, all the information about the nurses. So you can see if they're in good standing, any problems. They have to have had the background check already. And if they find those, it's something to be usually done within a few minutes. That's why we think it can be done within 5 days. And if not, then they take them on the normal course. They find something and they need to go check and maybe get more information, they can go ahead and do that. But this way we think it'll greatly expedite that, save people a lot of time and effort and sitting around who want to move here and add to our workforce. With that, I'm happy to take questions.
Questions? Yes, Senator Kern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, thank you, Kathy, for being here. It says here $100,000 from the Board of Nursing Fund. How much is in that fund right now?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kerr, a little over 14 million last we checked. So we think they have enough money to cover
Make a
this.
note of that.
So,
Wrong answer.
And can it be swept?
I believe it was 14.2, but.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Keep-
I mean,
Keep
if-
talking. I like the direction you're going in.
Well, if there's 14.2 million in there, Mr. Chair and Kathy, I mean, why aren't we like lowering the license fees? Why aren't we looking to make it more palatable for nurses to come into this state, as opposed to creating another full-time position and all that stuff?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kerr, actually the
Kern.
license. Kern.
Kerr is
Did I say
behind me.
Kerr? Oh,
No, that's fine. It
sorry.
happens all the time.
Sorry.
Yeah, just a letter.
The fees that are set now are very low. It's basically $160 every 4 years. They haven't been changed since about 1995. So I don't think the fees are a problem with people coming in, and even in fact, renewing. So, and has to be changed by statute. So they remain the same for all these years.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, the other person.
Alexis want to speak?
Was it,
No,
if
she said no.
necessary? No, okay, good. All right, and then let's have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move HB 2494 with due pass recommendation.
Final discussion? Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Alston? Senator Bennett?
Aye.
Senator Diaz? Aye. Senator Farnsworth?
Mr. Chairman,
You may.
let's put some of that 14.2 million to work. I vote aye.
Senator Fernandez?
Pass.
Senator Kern?
Pass.
Senator Kerr?
Aye.
Senator Mendez?
Aye.
Senator Alston?
Aye.
Senator Fernandez?
Aye.
Senator Kern?
I'm going to vote no today.
Senator Hoffman?
No.
Senator Cowell?
All right.
8 ayes, 2 noes, 0 noes.
Madam Secretary, with 8 ayes, 2 nays, 0 not voting, you have given House Bill 2494 due pass recommendation. HCR 2058.
For the record, my name's Hunter Smith, legislative intern staffing the Elections Committee. Mr. Chair and members, House Concurrent Resolution 2058, subject to voter approval, constitutionally requires the Independent Redistricting Commission to conduct a census that includes a tabulation of the number of U.S. citizens residing in Arizona for each year that ends in 0, and specifies that the Independent Redistricting Commission must create legislative districts of equal citizen population rather than equal population. The bill also allows the census taken by the Independent Redistricting Commission to be conducted consistent with the procedures and methods adopted by the U.S. Census Bureau, but prohibits federal practices that are inconsistent with the prescribed requirements. Additionally, the bill stipulates that if a census is not completed by the Independent Redistricting Commission by December 31st of any year ending in 0, then the most current data from the U.S. Census Bureau must be used to determine the citizen population of each legislative district. Lastly, the bill grants any member of the legislature standing to initiate an action to enforce the requirements of the census taken by the Independent Redistricting Commission. Mr. Chair, there is an amendment that I'd be happy to explain.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Chair, the 11-line amendment in your name dated March 21st at 5:01 p.m. establishes the state census fund and transfers $5 million from the Citizens Clean Election Fund to the state census fund in each fiscal year. Additionally, the amendment specifies that the monies in the state census fund are continuously appropriated and may only be administered by the Independent Redistricting Commission or another body designated by the legislature to conduct the census. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No questions. Okay, the sponsor? Before we begin, we have a lot of people who want to speak on this bill, and we're going to do
2-4-2 against?
Yeah, 2-4-2 against. So if some of the people from Common Cause, All Voting is Local, the Sierra Club, you want to figure out who's odd person out, let me know, that'd be good. Go ahead.
Thank you. Members of the committee, today we are bringing for you an HCR to answer a serious crisis that is facing our state. Arizona has had a long history of issues with illegal immigration into our state and how we rectify that. The issue that we have is that currently, as the courts have interpreted the meanings of the 14th Amendment, says that in terms of how we apportion our federal congressional districts, that we count all persons or naturalized citizens within a state, rather than all actual voting citizens. What this causes is now we have a situation in which our southern border is completely open. Over the last 3 years, some between 8 and 10 million people have flooded across our southern border. That is a bigger population than 36 of our present states. And these people will continue to move and reside here within the United States. So far, there is no plan for how this is going to be arranged. And yet, we're continuing every 10 years, we are required to hold a census at the federal level to apportion that out. The result of that is that districts that have large populations of non-citizens who are here essentially receive additional votes in our congressional federal system. And so states like California probably right now have between 5 and 6 additional seat representatives in the House of Representatives. The last time we conducted the census, for reasons unknown, Arizona was undercounted, which means we were expected to pick up a seat that we did not. And as a result of this is we have really a constitutional question that needs to be brought forward, which is now that we have a federal government that has simply decided to abandon its responsibility to enforce immigration law, to leave our borders open, and to allow a flood of non-citizens into our districts, that is going to have a substantial constitutional impact on the representation of our states in Congress. But here in Arizona, that has a cascading effect as well, because in Arizona, we have in 2000, we passed our Independent Redistricting Commission, which relies on the federal census data that is taken by the federal census every 10 years and uses that data to redraw our district lines within our own state. So the makeup of this body is dependent on the federal census data, which counts residents and as population, not voters. And so I believe that nothing is more constitutional than saying that it is the right of the states to decide how they are going to draw their district lines and how they're going to, and who is going to be counted. And the one thing that we know from Arizona voters is that every time citizenship voting has been sent to the voters as a ballot initiative, it overwhelmingly passes, like 70-30. Republicans support it, independents support it, most Democrats do. We care about citizen voting. What we are doing in this case, so What we are going to do, what I'm recommending we do in this case, is that rather than remain tethered to the federal system, which is going to affect all of our own districts and how our voting works in our state, that we set aside funds each year and allow our state to conduct its own census for use by the Redistricting Commission, where we can set the terms, and the baseline needs to be that we count voters, we count citizens of the U.S. as we apportion out our districts. This will help us to better represent our districts and not make sure that we have certain areas, for example, densely packed urban centers that have disproportionate amounts of voting power in blocks, but less voters than other districts have in them. So citizenship voting is our goal. We can take this fund. We can conduct this census. I think it's something that our people demand, and it is a constitutional crisis. It is a question that needs to be put forward by the states. I will conclude by maybe addressing some of the questions I'm going to get, because I'm sure most of the questions are going to come to, aren't we going to get sued and challenged in federal court on this? And the answer to that is yes. For certain, we are going to be challenged by the federal courts, who are going to say this is somehow a violation of the Constitution. But the reality is that we often say the states are the laboratories of democracy. This is how federalism works. When situations and facts change on the ground, it is incumbent upon the states to raise these constitutional questions, to bring this up. We need to discuss citizenship voting and what we are going to do and where our voting rights are. We need to reinterpret and bring this forward. So I have no question that this is certainly going to be challenged, but it is a question that needs to be raised, because we have facts on the ground, and the facts is that as we see the effects of policies and as the situation on the ground changes, courts often have to reevaluate what their situations are. If we look at almost every change that has been made to the law has been made because of changes in policy by the courts. Our Supreme Court once said that people could be kept as property, and therefore slavery was constitutional. And then an ocean of blood and treasure later, we decided we were wrong on that, and we rescored that. The Supreme Court said that segregation was completely acceptable. And then only a few decades later, they re-examined the issue and decided that separate could never be equal, and they struck that down. We are now in a situation in which this is a serious constitutional question that is going to affect the rights of both the citizens of Arizona and across our country. Arizona needs to be a leader. We need to raise this question. We need to put this question to our voters and let them decide how they believe that our district line should be drawn. Nothing is more constitutional than to say that the states get to decide how they will run their elections and draw their district lines inside. This is a question that needs to be raised. I am ready for that fight, quite frankly. I think in the long run, if this gets to the Supreme Court, we win this fight and we change, and Arizona will be a leader and other states will follow our example. So,
questions for the sponsor?
I'm open for questions.
Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative. I guess I'm going to start with the cost. I was wondering, how did you get this far without a fiscal note?
Well, like I said, we passed it through the House. I think the situation is that the census only needs to be run every 10 years. I did address it with the House, and thanks to Mr. Kavanaugh, we came to a $5 million account on a year to be transferred to this fund in order to run it. We can work that, but quite frankly, we only need to do this every 10 years. So we have multiple sessions between now and then to work this out. As it stands right now, our current independent redistricting commission has about a $30 million surplus already. So it's pretty clear that we can come to a figure, and we can work on this over years. It's certainly something we can do and we can run.
Mr. Chairman and Representative, how did you come to the $5 million?
I'm taking it. I spoke with the staff. They said Mr. Kavanaugh had come initially. Initially, my original proposal didn't contain an amount. I'm open to a discussion on it. I think $5 million is a reasonable estimation. Right now, we're not 100% certain how much it will cost, but we know that I think we can have the funds to do it. It takes the United States Census Bureau spends about $10 billion to count the entire country in one go. Arizona is much more localized. It's much smaller. We can do it much more efficiently and much more cheaper than the federal government can do it.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, my notes say that the nationwide census took $14 billion last time. And if we were to just do some, cocktail math, with Arizona's population, we're probably looking at 300 million for ours. I'm wondering how you see the 5 million as reasonable.
I think we can do it way more efficiently than the federal government can do it. Arizona, again, is much more compact. Almost 70% of the state lives within Maricopa County or thereabouts in the district. We don't have that. We don't have all the vast things that the federal government needs to. And federal government has a lot more waste than state waste. I think we can do it for much cheaper.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we have no infrastructure, so we would have to be starting from nothing.
I'm sorry, why do we have no infrastructure?
The Census Bureau infrastructure that they rely on, I mean, it's not like you can't just do this with an internet app. I mean, like, there's a lot of administrative work and a lot of planning and research that goes into it. So, I mean, it sounds really rushed to start with just 5 million. I mean, there's, what about are you concerned about undercounts?
Well, no, I'm sorry, the first question to what is can we do it? Right now, the Census Bureau sets up the system for the census. The Census Bureau does not send federal agents to the United States from federal employees to count and conduct the census. The censuses are conducted by the state. The Federal Bureau simply sets that up. And so every census we have done has essentially been done by Arizona state employees who are simply temporarily employed or positioned by the Census Bureau. We know how to conduct a census in Arizona because we do it every 10 years as part of the thing. We can, as part of the current census, we can adopt those same things here in Arizona. I don't anticipate that we're not able to conduct a census in Arizona.
Look at it as a jobs bill.
Well, Mr. Chair, to that point, I don't know if the representative knows this, but like, it's really hard to find people to do things. You know how much people are paying for petition signatures just to get a petition signature?
$6. $6.
Ask Livingston how much he paid.
Oh, just because he made a bad choice doesn't mean that everybody else has to.
Depends on what time of the year you're collecting.
My point is, it's very difficult to find people to do this kind of
Right now,
work.
it's about $25 a signature.
Yeah, I'll do it for 20.
Oh, gosh. Please don't collect from me.
All right, let's get back to the Senate question. Senator Bennett.
It says the Independent Redistricting Commission or other officer or body as designated by the legislature. Representative Heap, what other officer or body within state government is contemplated by that concept?
Well, we wanted to leave it open because right now we have the Independent Redistricting Commission. They don't have, obviously the census is not part of their normal duties. So to simply say, well, this 5-person panel that we elect every year is going to conduct the census. So my assumption was we wanted to leave it open that as we work on this, as we lead up to 2030, that we have room to essentially designate under that office, officers and a body to conduct the census.
And Mr. Chairman, Representative, when you say as designated by the legislature, what act of the legislature is contemplated by those words?
Well, I imagine, because again, we're going to have multiple legislative sessions to work this out, so we'll get the feedback for the infrastructure we need. I'm assuming we're going to have to create some sort of body like an Arizona Census Bureau or a department underneath that would be under the Independent Redistricting Commission eventually, but probably it would operate in the lead up to it.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, what I'm talking about is, would we pass a bill, or would we just be able to just pass a resolution or a memorial, or
yeah.
what's contemplated here?
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, to Senator Bennett's point, I'm thinking like Board of Supervisors, every county has that. Why couldn't they conduct a census? And that would just take a statute change, I'm assuming.
That possibly, and I don't know quite the answer. I guess I anticipate a bill, but if there's other mechanisms to do that more efficiently, then I'm open to it.
And Mr. Chairman, is it your understanding, Representative Heap, does the U.S. Census count illegal aliens in Arizona in our census?
According to the census, so the census counts all residents, which means that it is currently counting them. Now, sometime there is some debate on whether or not the census workers can ask about citizenship, but that doesn't disqualify or qualify anyone to vote either way. So, for instance, the last one under the Trump administration, they did have a question where they could ask them, "Are you a citizen?"
They tried,
but that doesn't.
I think the U.S. Supreme, to that point, Mr. Chairman, I think the Department Commerce versus New York, in a very narrow decision, 5-4 against, prohibited them from asking that question. I think if that question were given to the court today, it would be a different result, but.
And to that point, Mr. Chair, having been involved in some of these census counts in my past life, yeah, you're not asked, you're just county bodies. You're going under bridges, you're going into places normal people wouldn't normally go and count a body, but you're counting everybody because it's all about money and it's all about redistricting.
Well, to that point.
I think private groups also go out and
Yeah, private
try to
groups,
run.
everybody.
To that point, the Department of the Census, or the Bureau of the Census, I think it's called, Census Bureau, claims on their fact sheets and things like that related to the census that they exclude illegal aliens through some type of a formula. I question that as to how they come up with that, but they state in their documentation that illegals present in the country are not counted in the count. But
Okay. Any other questions for the sponsor? All right.
Well,
Yep, go ahead.
I mean, so just when this bill came up, and I'm thinking of, in the last census, several states, I don't know whether they did it deliberately or didn't, but a lot of them seem to be more leaning the blue states. They were overcounting, and I'm looking at the data right here. Some states undercounted, some states overcounted, which again affects our congressional districts, affects a lot of things. Money appropriations. Do you think this would actually, because you said it, the states actually do the census every 10 years. But do you think this bill would actually help maybe legitimize our count? We could look at, are we trying to get rid of the U.S. Census Bureau and take it over completely, or are we going to kind of look at what we have compared to what they have?
Okay. Well, so first of all, we cannot get rid of the Census Bureau in terms of federal apportionment. That is in the Constitution. The federal government is still going to continue to run their own census, and they will use that for their federal apportionment. That's a federal issue. This bill can't touch that. This is for our drawing of our own districts within the state. So we can't, I don't think it would be constitutional unless there was an amendment for us to simply say, well, Arizona is going to replace the census entirely. The federal government will still conduct its census. But if we for our own in-state districts conduct our own census, then we can set our own rules. And one of those rules I think we need to focus on is citizenship voting. That needs to be a priority, because the problem is if you have a district with large numbers of non-citizens voting, what that does is that dilutes the power of the votes of citizens in districts and in other districts. So a district that has more citizen voters but lower population, their vote now counts for less. And a district that has much fewer voters but a higher population, their vote now gets maximized. So I think this is a constitutional issue that needs to be raised as a question, which is, are we a nation of citizens or are we a nation of residents?
Okay, and I guess we're kind of treading over old ground now. Any new questions? No. Okay, then let's get the speakers up.
All right, Mr. Chair, did Sandy Barr and all of her cohorts get together and figure out who's going to speak?
Yeah, we did. I'm not speaking.
No? Okay, who from that team is leading off? Okay. State your name for the record, please, who you represent.
Sandy Barr's not speaking?
She said no.
Oh, well, first, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My chair, members of the committee, my name is Jenny Guzman, and I am here on behalf of Arizona's chapter of Common Cause. Common Cause is a nonpartisan grassroots organization dedicated to upholding the core values of American democracy. I am here in opposition to HCR 2058. This referral is completely unprecedented and would create extraneous financial burdens on the state of Arizona. If this referral were to pass, it would put at risk the $29 billion allocated to Arizona of federal funds that rely upon an accurate census and cost Arizona voters hundreds of millions of state dollars to carry out an inaccurate alternative census. Currently, Arizona relies on hundreds of millions of dollars of federal funds to administer the census statewide. This referral would propose a brand new census running at the same time as the federal census, but funded entirely by Arizonans. HCR 2058 will disproportionately hurt rural communities and counties, as they may receive significantly less federal funding for their other projects. as a result of confusion and inadequate census responses. In 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court in Evidwell versus Abbott, a case out of Texas, unanimously rejected an argument that states were required to draw state legislative districts based on a citizens-only count. Ultimately, HCR 2058 violates the U.S. Constitution and would have a domino effect of damage to our local counties and communities, and we urge lawmakers to vote no. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Just a quick question. You correctly stated that the federal government will still be running its own census. And it's my understanding that the distribution of federal funds where there's a population issue is based on the federal census. So why do you think the federal government would ignore their own census and use ours?
No, so sorry, Chair, what I mean to say by that is that we can expect drop-off in participation due to two censuses running at the same time. So regardless of whether or not this passes, if there's two censuses running at the same time, one is going to get less participation than the other, and we can expect that to hurt rural counties disproportionately and impact the federal funding that all cities and communities in Arizona receive.
Any other questions? Oh, next. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Let's try one of these. How about Jim Carrasco? No. Karen Cheney? No. Mark Dilberman? Okay, take it away. Are you number 2?
Yes, I'm not Mark.
Got it.
But thank you. For the record, thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Blake Lister, and I'm representing myself in opposition to HCR 2058. Personally, I believe that voters are supposed to choose our politicians, not the other way around. This legislation would effectively allow for the inverse by effectively enacting gerrymandering on racial lines. Arizona is comprised of immigrant communities. I work with immigrants. This legislation is an attempt to silence their voice. The American Constitution is clear that everyone living in this great country is guaranteed representation in our legislative body, even if they are not eligible and even if they do not vote. It is also worth noting, and I would like to stress this to the committee, that in his original argument, both on February 14th and today, the sponsor of this bill, Representative Heap, stated the belief that the federal census is not conducted well, pointing to Arizona's lack of picking up a 10 congressional seat in the last census as an example of that. If this legislation's counting methods were to be enacted, however, our total population count would lessen from what it otherwise could be in the next census, which would continue to stifle Arizona's political power. I ask that you vote no on HCR 2058 and all legislation that would disenfranchise voices and voters in our legislative districts. We shouldn't have to gut a good program like the Clean Elections Fund with a last-minute amendment to fund work the federal government already does anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
We got one more. We got
Okay.
Greg Blackie.
All right, close us out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, for the record, Greg Blackie with the Arizona Free Enterprise Club here in support of HCR 2058. I think the sponsor did an excellent job explaining kind of the problem that we're facing and the reason that this measure was brought forward, and there was a pretty lively discussion on some of the questions. So I'll just re-outline that I think it's pretty well known that in the last census that Arizona was undercounted, and that cost us a congressional seat. But more principally, our districts should be apportioned fairly based on citizen population. It's kind of the first qualification to be a voter, is to be a citizen of the U.S. I do want to address the Everett case that was just mentioned. That case, the Supreme Court said that the 14th Amendment didn't require that or that the districts be apportioned based on voter eligible population, but they didn't say that states can't do it. They just said it doesn't require them. It was a lawsuit in which 2 Texas residents tried to say that their district maps were wrong because they didn't use voter eligible population, instead used total population. And so this is kind of an open question constitutionally, and think it stands on strong ground that these states can apportion based on how they best see fit, and that should be citizen-only population. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Questions? None? Okay. Does the sponsor want to close? No? Okay. Then let's move it.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I move HCR 2058 with the due pass recommendation. I also move the 11-line amendment in your name dated March 21st, 2024 at 5:01 p.m. be adopted.
All in favor of the care amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, over HCR 2058 as amended, receive a due pass recommendation.
Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Alston? No. Senator Grant?
I'd like to explain my vote,
You may.
Mr. Chair. I will associate my comments with the vice chairs on the first bill that we consider today and vote aye for now.
Senator Diaz? Nay. Senator Farnsworth?
Aye.
Senator Fernandez?
No.
Senator Kern?
Aye.
Senator Kerr?
Aye.
Senator Mendez?
So it's already been established, again today here, that Congress has exclusive power to determine the manner in which the census is conducted. And it doesn't seem like the sponsor or anybody was against that. They somehow, for some reason, were proposing that we waste Arizona taxpayer money and our own time on relitigating Reconstruction. And why? I mean, the argument was literally because we're the meth lab of democracy. And somehow we can do everything that the federal government can do and better with less money and more efficiency. It really bothers me to try to understand, where the motivation would come for this. With no authority, we're not even trying to mandate that the federal government acknowledge the results from our own census. We just want to conduct a different one to show different numbers, to then do something different than we're already doing now, to justify different districts, to justify then further attacking elections. There doesn't seem to be a real good motivation in terms of like serving the people with this proposal, and it seems to want to do more that needs to be done for the purposes of the census. Because of that, I'm voting no.
Senator Hoffman?
Aye.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Aye.
6 ayes, 4 noes, 0 non-voting.
Members, by a vote of 6 ayes, 4 noes, 0 not voting, you have given HCR 2058 as amended to do pass recommendation. 2449.
Mr. Chairman, members, for the record, Michael Madden, Senate Research Analyst for the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. House Bill 2449 exempts medications prescribed to an access member to address a mental disorder from prior authorization and step therapy protocols if the member is at least 18 years old, the medication is for one of outlined mental health disorders, and meets additional criteria. Access and its contractors may impose step therapy that requires a member to try a maximum of one prescription drug before receiving coverage for the drug prescribed by the member's physician or primary care provider. The bill further requires Access, when developing a preferred drug list for prescription drug coverage, to ensure that the Access Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee reviews any drug that is newly approved by the FDA for the treatment of qualifying mental health disorders at its first meeting following FDA approval. The bill applies these requirements effective October 1st, 2025. Mr. Chairman, there was one proposed amendment I'd be happy to explain.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members, the 3-page amendment in the chair's name dated March 22nd at 3:13 p.m. removes the specified list of mental disorders for which medications are exempt from prior authorization and step therapy protocols, and instead applies the exemption to any antipsychotic or antidepressant drug prescribed to somebody 18 or older that is approved by the FDA for use as described on its label. The amendment requires that the drug be prescribed by a psychiatrist or psychiatric nurse practitioner unless certain conditions apply, and requires Access to submit an annual report relating to claims for mental health medications. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No questions? The sponsor then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, senators. Thank you for hearing this bill. I'll try to be brief. So at the beginning of the session, this bill was brought to me. And one of the things that we want to focus on, especially in the area of health, is helping those that are most vulnerable, especially those that are most vulnerable among us, right? So House Bill 2449 is about making sure that those struggling with mental health in Arizona get the treatment or the care that they need. In essence, what this bill does, it ensures that individuals with serious mental health conditions get the medication that their healthcare provider believes is the right treatment for them, and it minimizes prior authorization and step therapy protocols for getting or from getting in the way. I won't go through the list because staff has already gone through it, but I do want you to know that through the process, I have made sure that we have had stakeholder meetings. We've had numerous conversations because I really do want to make sure we have good policy on this. I know that from our conversations, everyone agrees that there is an issue. There's a problem here and it needs to be addressed. It's how we resolve it, really, that the disagreement is there. And I know that one of the main concerns from the opposition is cost. In that process, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your amendment because that is the attempt with the reporting to make sure that we address this. I will tell you that there is disagreement on if this is going to cost. There are numerous studies that have come out, and we can see data, empirical data from different states, that this is actually providing help or providing savings as well. So today, I know that time is brief, but we have two moms that will be testifying, hearing their story. And then we also have, I want you to know that Jeremy Browning is going to be here to testify. If you have any questions on some of that data from different states and how those savings are impacting other states as well. So I told you I'd be brief. That's what I got.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Montenegro, give me an example of how this is going to work.
So my understanding is right now, in order, some folks that have serious mental illness, for them to be assigned or prescribed certain prescriptions, there's up to 5 or 6 different times or different prescriptions that they go through before they can give them really what the doctors want to give them or believe would help them. And so with this...
And just for clarification, I'm trying to understand the bill. So if there's somebody that's severely mentally ill, right now they have to go through, do they have to go through like a third-party provider to get authorization, or does Access do that, or?
This is limited only to Access, this bill. And yes, they have to go through different steps in that therapy.
And who does the steps?
It's prescribed in law that they have to go through the provider, their doctor has to prescribe different types that are in statute already before they can get to perhaps what the doctor feels would actually help them.
Okay.
And it is limited to psychiatrists and psychiatric and mental health nurse practitioners.
So in other words, Mr. Chair, just again for clarification, I know the bill is bringing it from the 6-step process down to 1. My concern, and I don't know if my concern's valid reading the bill, my concern is that if you take away the 6 steps, which costs taxpayer money, and you limit it to just 1 step, who benefits from that? I know the severely mentally ill benefits from it, but I'm looking at, it's all about money. I'm looking at the third-party provider. I'm looking at the psychiatrist. I'm looking at who benefits from that if you remove. Is it unlimited medication that a SMI person can take now?
No.
Can get?
Mr. Chair, to that point. Yeah, to that point. No, it's not unlimited. It's still what the doctor prescribes. I think that's the.
Was it a question for you, or was it a question for
Well,
the
it is
bill
a question, Mr. Vice Chair. I want to know, does the third party, because I've seen bills here where, if you limit the process, then the third party provider actually has the ability to take away more taxpayer money. And so my concern is that, go ahead and just explain it to me.
Well, my understanding, and Representative Montenegro can certainly elaborate on this, but it's just following the doctor's prescription. You don't get to change what the doctor prescribed. This is so the insurance companies, again, this is my understanding, and Representative Montenegro, you can please correct me if I'm wrong, but the doctor prescribes a medication, and in the current system, they might try multiple prescriptions that are not that one. They might be less expensive, and so with this, it just immediately goes to the one that they prescribed with the dosage they prescribed and the time they prescribed it.
Okay.
Is that correct?
That's what I understand.
Mr. Chairman, to this point, I have
Senator
some language
Mendez.
that might help if we're missing. So this step approach that we're talking about, another way to talk about it is fail first. So you have to try this medication, and it has to fail before we can give you this medication. This one's got to fail before we can give you that medication. The doctor knows that this one's probably going to have a better chance, but we got to go through all these failures before we can give them the one that we know has got a better chance. Might it be more expensive? Maybe.
Okay, any other questions for the sponsor? Okay, let's get the speakers up.
Senator Alston, I think, had a question.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
just a comment, Mr. Chairman. As I was being lobbied on this bill earlier today, I was told that there will still be a step, but it'll be one prescription rather than 3 or 4, that they'd have to try one other generic drug before they would be free to prescribe the more expensive one. But don't take that as gospel. It was just what I was told by a lobbyist earlier today.
Mr. Chair.
It wasn't Sierra Club, was it?
Mr. Chair, Representative Montenegro, are there any other categories or groups of illnesses, diseases, or other conditions, thank you, where we already specify what you're trying to specify for this group?
The way that it's written right now, no.
Are you talking about within
Mr.
the
Chair.
area of mental illness or in
No,
medicine
not-
in general?
Just in general.
Because, I mean, in general, a doctor can provide this antibiotic or that antibiotic. There's no step to there.
Well, we're in 36-2907, which is covered health and medical services. And in paragraph 4, it starts talking about medications and others that are ordered or on a prescription by a physician or a dentist, no. Right now, we seem to be adding a exception for medications related to mental illness, that they don't have to go through this step process or fail first, if you want to call it that, and are not subject to prior authorization. So I'm not seeing, and I just didn't know if you know or people who have brought this bill to you, I'm not seeing anywhere else in this section or in other statutes where we are prohibiting pre-authorization, prior authorization, or step therapies in other situations.
But why don't we get
That's
Willa Murphy from Access up here?
Mr. Chairman, briefly, what I would also suggest is when you hear the stories of the 2 moms, it's going to be a little bit clearer as well. And then, like I said, we've got Jeremy Brown in here to answer any questions on the studies.
Well, let's get, can you answer the question about the steps and elsewhere in the system?
Mr. Chair and members, I'm not familiar with
Just
any.
identify yourself.
Willa Murphy with Access. My apologies. I'm not familiar with any similar prohibitions in statute. I would have to take a look, want to make sure, but not in this section.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Calder, you can contribute to this?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, just to clarify when
Just
you asked.
identify yourself.
Oh, Diane McAllister, sorry. Here on behalf of the Arizona Pharmacy Association in support of the bill. Just to clarify, you asked about if it was in this section or any other portion of statute. There is in Title 20 some step therapy guardrails around, some exceptions to when you cannot make a patient continue to fail on drugs. That step therapy guidelines did not get applied to Access, which is why there are these situations where we're seeing so many failures that are happening. So there is kind of other approaches on trying to deal with the fail first or step therapy protocols in other places in the statute, and I can send that to you.
Okay, would you fill out a slip since you're not
Yes, I
signing?
will.
Okay, let's, sponsor want to say anything else?
Rachel, and we have one of the.
Okay.
Lori had to leave, so she's going to read a statement and say some words, and then we have Crystal as well.
All right, let's get Rachel Strife.
Rachel Strife.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Rachel Strife, organizer of the Arizona Mad Moms. And I could probably answer a lot of those questions because I actually looked at the entire 1,700-page manual from Access on step therapy protocols for all medications. It's actually pretty interesting. This bill has been polarizing. Arizona Mad Moms have been caught in an uncomfortable place between pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies. And like I said, I took the time to read those 1,700 pages. I also took the time to read New York State Medicaid, 84-page document on their step therapy protocols for their medications.
Theirs is 84 and ours is 1,700?
That's correct. And New York already has single-step protocols that this bill is seeking to implement for SMI with very few exceptions across the board for all conditions. Even if this bill passes, Arizona will still have more restrictions than New York State. As I read through that 1,700-page document, in particular for the serious mental illness conditions, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective, postpartum depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, I was truly appalled. I saw restrictions that directly contradict the American Psychiatric Association's guidelines for the treatment of schizophrenia. I also saw how my own family member was harmed by the restrictions in our current access manual more than once. Yesterday I was asked why SMI conditions should get preferential treatment. The implication was that if we limit step protocol restrictions for SMI, then everyone else will want it too, and then the floodgates are going to be opened with unfettered taxpayer dollars going to Big Pharma. And here's my answer. SMI conditions are dangerous and deadly not just for the patient, but for the caregiver, the healthcare workers, the families, and the general public. Tell me one other medical condition that can harm other people, especially mothers. Caregiver violence has been a taboo subject, and mothers are terrified by the very real possibility their kids are going to end up in jail if they complain. And I'm tired of caregiver violence getting swept under the rug. This is a good bill, even though drug companies wrote it. And I plan to be back here next year because this bill doesn't go far enough. I want these changes. You wrote it? Good. Well, he had help, I know. Okay. So this bill doesn't go far enough. Next year I want to come back here and expand this loosening of the restrictions and improving access to treatment for the non-Medicaid population and for other classes of medications that directly impact the SMI community.
Okay.
We've got to
All right, thank you.
remove barriers.
All right, I don't want to have to debit you for next year since you're in that bill. So. Beth Kohler? Beth Kohler here?
Crystal still.
Oh. I figured I'd get a negative vote.
Mr. Chair, for the members, Mr. Chair, members, for the record, my name is Beth Kohler. I'm the CEO of the Arizona Association of Health Plans. So we are here in respectful opposition to House Bill 2449, although we appreciate the sponsor's willingness to dialogue on these important issues. So the Access Health Plans are in this weird position. Senator Kern, you were asking how some of this works. So what happens is Access sets clinical criteria for the medications based on cost effectiveness and input from doctors and the like. There is a workaround in their policy that if a doctor thinks a member needs a different medication or to skip all those steps for medical necessity, their policy says that can happen. But they set that criteria. But then the health plans are the one who pays for the medication. So whatever
to that point, just for clarification, right now, from what I'm understanding, is if through the step process, a doctor prescribes a more generic, is there a different pay scale that the doctor gets if he prescribes a higher scale medicine as opposed to lower scale medicine? Is there a difference in the amount of money the doctor
gets? Mr. Chair, Senator Kern, no. Not to my knowledge. There's difference in pricing of the drug itself, but not, to my knowledge, any provider difference for the way they prescribe. Okay. No. Can I have a minute since I have it? Okay.
You can close out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, and you, Mr. Chairman, probably don't remember me actually standing before you a decade ago, Senator Kavanaugh, in a different role when I was at the agency, but you actually called me down here to talk about the rising cost of pharmaceuticals and what actions the agency was taking, putting in place through the same tools that we're taking away here to stem those rising costs for other new drugs on the market.
And obviously those actions failed dismally, so.
Well, as you know, the fiscal note for the bill outlines a cost of $44 to $60 million from the general fund. We understand the amendment lowers that to $40 to $50 million. That still equates, the main reason I'm here talking to you is that equates to about $150 million in unfunded costs that are not funded in the bill that the health plans will have to pay out. So
Okay.
we understand the proponents think the costs are overstated. We actually think, as these things work often, we actually think the costs are potentially understated. But either way, the costs are not funded through the bill. So we appreciate the opportunity to continue to just be on the record with our concerns about that, and we'd be happy to
Mr.
answer
Chair.
your questions.
Questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, good.
This is to Senator Bennett's question earlier. Are there any other areas that have sort of these issues in terms of people prescribing a drug and having to go through a step? I don't know, antibiotics, cancer, like is.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, so there are all sorts of drugs that don't require prior authorization for commonly prescribed drugs. The plans actually, on other types of procedures, if they are approving at a very high rate, they're not allowed to have an authorization. But in these cases, Access sets all the steps and criteria, again, based on those cost effectiveness calculations that we are not involved in, the plans that pay out the money. They set those themselves.
Okay, and then Mr. Chair, are there other states that are doing, what's the more common way of doing this, with the steps or without the steps?
Mr. Chair, Senator Fernandez, to my knowledge, it really runs the gamut. You are seeing some states trying to roll back, as was mentioned, two mixed results. I know that, I don't want to put her on the spot, but I know Willa has done a lot of research on this and talked to a lot of other states. The feedback we've gotten from other states who have gone in this direction that it is costing more than they expected. I know there is a desire to have savings, and we hope that those savings materialize truly. But the way that the funding typically works is you've got to front fund the costs, and then hopefully savings materialize, and those would get recouped.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, we have one more speaker?
Thank you.
Okay, see you in 10 years.
Crystal Fox.
Honorable Chair and committee members, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm actually going to speak to you right to the disease. I'm going to speak to you about schizophrenia and about psychosis and why this is so important. We're going to go back to November of 2020, and my son was 20 years old, untreated, no medication, believed that his father was taking photographs of him and internet videos, putting it on the internet, raping him, getting friends to rape him, making money on this. He believed that when I was in Michigan, that I was dating somebody named Lucifer who was in a cult. This cult member raped me, and so I killed him, and that's why I had to move to Arizona. This is the level of delusion and mental illness that I was facing when I was trying to get my son treatment. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit. He ended up in jail, and in jail, he became even more psychotic, more delusional. When he got out, he was 109 pounds. He was catatonic and still untreated. This led to, we're going to fast forward a little bit further, still no medication. He ended up in June of 2021 murdering his father. He believed that he was falsely accused for child molestation. So this is the kind of disease that we're treating. Joshua later, untreated, he was given Risperidol, which did not work because he was given a medication that didn't work and had to go through these steps first. He ended up committing suicide December 23rd of 2023. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions? Okay, I'm very sorry for
And
your
thank you.
loss. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, then let's have a motion.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I move HB 2449 with a due pass recommendation. Oh, I also move the three-page amendment in your name dated March 22nd, 2024, at 3:13 p.m. be adopted.
Okay, in favor of the Cameron Amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Senator, Chairman.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. I want to give the fiscal estimate very briefly.
Well, let them make it the bill
Finish the
moved.
motion, yeah.
Good.
Mr. Chairman, I move HB 2449 as amended, receive a due pass recommendation.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Much appreciated. I'll be brief. For the record, Willa Murphy with Access. Just briefly want to share our preliminary fiscal estimate for HB 2449 is amended. So the estimate has a couple of components. I'll go through briefly. The first is increased pharmacy spending. So we anticipate an increased cost of a range of 32.3 million general fund to 43.7 million general fund, and that's about 126 to 170 million total fund respectively. We also anticipate an additional loss of 5.7 million general fund, 30.1 million total fund, and supplemental rebates for the antipsychotics class. There's a lot of caveats and moving parts. Want to be respectful of your time, and I appreciate the opportunity. And I'm happy to answer any questions and certainly update you all once that is
Okay,
finalized.
questions? None. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And as with all bills that are money bills before the Appropriations Committee, they will be stopping at rules, and this becomes a budget issue. So a large part of these hearings are the information that's available to members when we get into the budget negotiations. All right. Sponsor want to say anything in the end? No? Okay, let's, you call it. Call the roll call.
Senator Alston?
Aye.
Senator Bennett?
I'd like to explain my vote, Mr. Chair. I think the solution is somewhere between full pre-authorization and multiple steps, or no pre-authorization at all and zero, and the elimination of any steps. But as I try to figure out where that magic point is, I'll vote aye for now.
Senator Diaz? Aye. Senator Farnsworth?
Pass.
Senator Fernandez?
Aye.
Senator Kern?
Pass.
Senator Kern?
Aye.
Senator Mendez?
So everybody's body is different. Mental health different, right? And not all medication is the same. Not all medication works the same for everybody. So just to reestablish, what step protocol means is you got to fail first. So someone has to try one or more insurer preferred medications unsuccessfully before they can receive coverage for the medication that their doctor recommends. The doctor probably already knows it's going to work. This is like if we honestly believed that there was a one-size-fits-all for everybody with SMI. And why are we doing this? But just for some cost savings efficiency, to make things easier for the insurance companies? We're not trying to tell doctors what to do with this proposal. With this proposal, the doctors can now take into account prior stability, drugs effectiveness, or the potential risk to the patient's health or the mental health, and not just cost effectiveness when prescribing the recommended medication. I grew up with a little brother living with SMI, and we had to watch him fail multiple medications until we found a medication that worked for him. But the thing is that these patients can't wait patiently like everybody else can to go through this fail first kind of step. Every time we had the chance, self-harm, we had the chance, hospital, homelessness, him getting mixed up with the prison system. This families living with SMI should not have to do this by themselves. They're having to fail first, but at home by themselves. And it's impossible. We're putting people in ridiculous situations. I have to vote yes. This would have saved my family so much harm and trauma. If we could have just gotten medication that the doctor wanted to give them. So I have to vote yes and ask for everybody else to vote yes. Thank you.
Senator Farnsworth?
Nay.
Senator Kern?
Thank you. Permission to explain my vote real quick? So the reason I'm here is to protect the Arizona taxpayer and to run good legislation for the voters and for the people of Arizona. And I've heard the stories. I just knowing the system that we're in, I always question what's really going on. I've heard the stories. I know the sponsor. my concern is that the costs from removing the sixth step, going to just the, from the generic to the Rolls Royce, I guess, of medications, is that the taxpayers will be on the hook for the money. I mean, what are we looking at as far as dollar figure? Access is funded by the taxpayer, and my job is to protect the taxpayer. So I don't know what the numbers are. I don't see any data in here as far as will this help, will this hurt. I've heard some stories which my heart goes out to, all the stories in this room. I have a brother that's got issues similar to yours, Mr. Mendez. I'm just, I'm going to have to vote no today.
No.
I tend to agree with Senator Bennett. I don't know if the answer is no steps, 6 steps, 3 steps, or maybe a scaled-back trial program to see if, in fact, it actually works. Although, if we were to arrive at that conclusion, I would say Access would need to randomly assign the no step to different doctors and not just pick, the 3 greatest doctors who, will inevitably have a really great outcome. But I can tell you that the dollar figures for this bill as proposed is not going to get into this year's budget with a $2 billion shortfall. Fortunately, the governor, by her delaying engaging with the budget, has given us more time to think about this, so I will vote aye.
7 ayes, 3 noes, 0 not
Members voted 7 ayes, 3 noes, and 0 not voting. You have given House Bill 2449 as amended. It do pass the recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you.
Okay, 2326.
Mr. Chair and members, there is a strike everything amendment to this bill that I'd be happy to explain.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the strike everything amendment to House Bill 2326 in your name dated March 21st, 2024 at 8:25 a.m. renames the Peace Officer Training Equipment Fund to the Peace Officer Training Equipment and Non-Lethal Weapons Fund and allows monies in the fund to be used for the purchase of non-lethal weapons in addition to peace officer equipment. The bill requires the Peace Officer Training Equipment and Non-Lethal Weapons Fund Advisory Commission to annually submit written recommendations to the chairpersons of the Senate Military Affairs, Public Safety, and Border Security Committee and the House Military Affairs and Public Safety Committee or their successor committees, rather than the Senate Commerce and Public Safety Committee and the House Judiciary and Public Safety Committee or their successor committees. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff? No questions? Okay. Where'd Representative Payne go?
I haven't seen him.
I thought he was here.
No, he's never here.
All right. All right, let's go. Let's do the request to speak. Mike Williams.
Mike Williams, come on up.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, my name is Mike Williams. Here on behalf of, a number of different law enforcement agencies that have requested some non-lethal weapons. The current fund that was established years ago through legislation, and what it does is it was going for training in simulators. Throughout the state, we've put in a number of these simulators, and so there's a lot of money in the fund that's still remaining. There's been a request in the new wave of policing to start looking at non-lethal weapons as defined by the Justice Department. A non-lethal weapon is a weapon that will do no harm to a suspect or to get compliance. Originally, we had a bill that was adding a $2 to the price of tickets, and that was very unpopular, and this committee killed it. So we looked at the existing fund. There was plenty of money in the existing fund to take care of both needs. That's all this does, is add the word non-lethal weapons to the fund and allows agencies to ask for that. A non-lethal weapon would be something that you could use before you have to use a taser on a suspect. A taser is considered less lethal, and a lot of times when you use a taser, you have to call an ambulance out and you have to send the person to the hospital to be checked out. A non-lethal weapon would be something like an E-wrap that would wrap you up, or a pepper ball that it would be irritating to you, but it wouldn't do any permanent damage. That's all the bill does. Any agency that requests money out of the fund would come to the legislature and ask for it, and it would go before this body. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair,
Questions? Yes, go ahead.
how much is in the fund currently?
I believe, Mr. Chairman, I just checked, there was over $3 million in the fund, and it's added to quarterly.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
how much do these devices, I mean, I know it varies, but like, how much does like this blanket cost, for instance, or these other things?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, sir?
How much do these items cost, the non-lethal weapons?
Mr. Chairman, I don't represent a lot of the non-lethal weapons. There's a thing called E-wrap. I have no idea what it costs. It's a net that goes around the person. They use it a lot of times for a patient that might be suffering from mental illness. Pepper balls are as small as 5 cents a round. But a lot of times, like Phoenix, Yuma, Tucson, are all trying to bring in pepper balls to have a deterrent before they have to use a taser. And so they're outfitting them as a non-lethal option, according to the Justice Department, as a one more step before you get to a dangerous tool.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Williams, can you tell me who you are actually representing?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Alston, I do represent a company called Pepperball that had a pilot program last year. I do not represent any of the other non-lethal weapons.
Okay. And are there any other, would you have any other clients that would be considered vendors as well?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Alston, I do represent a company called Vertra that has done some of the simulators in the past that money has come out of this fund for, and we've testified in front of that committee on that. That would be the only two vendors that have ever gotten money out of the fund.
Okay. That's all for right now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions? No, all right. Is Hugo Polanco here?
It was earlier.
Yeah, he is.
Chair and members, Hugo Polanco with Creosote Partners here on behalf of the ACLU of Arizona in opposition to House Bill 2326. House Bill 2326 could lead to the increasing deployment of experimental unnecessary weaponry against civilian populations. Non-lethal weapons can include electronic control devices like tasers, crowd control devices such as sound or energy weapons, and supposedly non-lethal munitions such as rubber bullets, water cannons, and tear gas. Often these weapons are deployed in an indiscriminate manner, harming innocent people exercising their First Amendment rights. Serious health ramifications have been reported due to the use of these weapons. Physicians for Human Rights warns that supposedly non-lethal weapons can cause severe burns, respiratory problems, prolonged pain, disruption of nerves and blood vessels, and death. For some non-lethal munitions, such as stun grenades, they recommend that their use be prohibited. Finally, the use of non-lethal weapons are not a replacement for conflict resolution, mental health training, and de-escalation training that would lead to less injuries, less deaths, and less community harms. Indeed, there is a likelihood that non-lethal munitions, like lethal munitions, will be used disproportionately against people of color and those with mental health issues. At a minimum, any agency that uses funds to purchase so-called non-lethal weapons should have a community-reviewed plan for their deployment, should be required to report quarterly on use of force incidents where the munitions were used, should be required to report any health impacts, and in each use, whether nonviolent means such as de-escalation were deployed first. Since House Bill 2326 contains none of these protections, or really any public protections at all, the ACLU opposes and asks you to do the same. Thank you.
Questions? No. Yes. No, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can we call up Mike Williams? I have a question on the lethal weapon versus non-lethal weapon.
That would be a recall.
Versus less lethal.
Yeah. So my understanding is there's more than two categories, right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, yes. And with all due respect to my friend from the ACLU, and we've actually done a lot of de-escalation training through the other client I represent. There are three categories. There's lethal, there's less lethal, and there's non-lethal. When you get to non-lethal, that is included with a taser, electronic stun device, rubber bullets, all can cause permanent damage. That is considered less lethal under the Justice Department definition. When you get to non-lethal, you have to have, the Justice Department has to look at it, has to realize there can be no permanent damage, nor can there be any extraordinary circumstances where it would cause permanent damage to a suspect. So a taser is non-lethal, less lethal, a stun gun, a bead bug, rubber bullets, those are all non-lethal, less lethal devices. ERAPs and things like that, those are called non-lethal devices. The person that would be affected has to be able to walk away without any medical treatment, from my understanding of the Justice Department. At one time, Taser considered themselves a non-lethal, and they were told by the Justice Department they could no longer call themselves non-lethal. They had to call themselves less lethal.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move the bill.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I move HB 2326 with a due pass recommendation. I also move the strike everything amendment in your name dated March 21st, 2024 at 8:25 a.m. be adopted.
Okay, all in favor of the cabinet amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I move HB 2326 as amended receive a due pass recommendation.
Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Austin?
No.
Senator Bennett?
Aye.
Senator Diaz? Nay. Senator Farnsworth?
Aye.
Senator Fernandez?
Aye.
Senator Kern?
An enthusiastic aye.
Senator Kurt?
Aye.
Senator Mendez?
No.
Senator Halton?
Aye.
Senator Kaplan?
All right.
7 ayes, 3 noes, 0 not voting.
Members, we have voted 7 ayes, 3 noes, 0 noting. You have given HB 2326 as amended a due pass recommendation. 2024?
Thank you, members.
It won't be 2024 by the time we finish this meeting.
Okay, we're almost done.
Mr. Chair and members, House Bill 2024 deposits $50 million from the state lottery fund in fiscal years 2025 and 2026 to the on-farm irrigation efficiency fund. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the staff? No, the sponsors in the wings?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members for hearing this bill. I'm Gail Griffin, LD 19. We have been trying to find things that work to cut water. As you know, water is one of the top issues in the state of Arizona. We have a lot of tools that are available. This talks about the efficiency fund, on-farm efficiency fund, where we're looking at how to use less water and increase crop production. And we had several individuals from Israel come over several years ago and tell us what they do in Israel for efficiency, water efficiency. So this is infrastructure. We have some expert in the audience that will testify. This is set up through the University of Arizona, and 11 of the 15 counties that we have these projects going. I know in my district we've looked at several great projects, and the farmers are just really happy in using less water and improving efficiency and increasing crop. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, the sponsor?
Otherwise, I'd like to call Dr. Ethan Orr up,
Let's
if
do it.
that's okay.
Dr. Orr.
That's where I thought I seen you. I'm like, that guy was so
Dr. Orr,
familiar.
as opposed to Dr. No.
Thank you, Representative Griffin. Mr. Chair, and I will say I have my doctorate from ASU, so it's a real doctorate in everything. So I'm very bipartisan, U of A and ASU. I also, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I do have a breakdown of all of the projects in the name of transparency, if I may share them. To talk about this program, and this was really initiated as a bipartisan program, and we received the funding in March of this past year from $30 million, working with the legislature and Governor Ducey, and then ultimately Governor Hobbs at the time, to set the stage of what we can do as a state, because I know everyone talks about water and the issues of water. We as a state, and we should be very proud of, I'm proud of this as a fourth-generation Arizonan, we use less water now than we did in 1962 because we have invested in ourselves in technology and infrastructure, programs like this. What we have done, and I am a fiscal conservative, and I believe that every dollar needs to be accounted for. What we have done with the $30 million that we received in March, 23 of that has gone directly to the growers. We have a team of university scientists, soil scientists, irrigation specialists that work directly with the farmers to set up each of these 62 projects. Those projects throughout the state have converted 18,000 acres from flood irrigation to a more efficient form. What that means is we have saved 36,418 acre feet annually with that money. The private sector growers have matched that with $16.5 million. So 42% of the project costs come from the private sector. I just want to put that number in context before I start talking about the cost. That is over 12 times the size of Tempe Town Lake that working with agriculture we've conserved every year. My own city of Tucson, if I were to take what they drink, that's over 400,000 people, or 74% of the city of Tucson drinks in any year with this small investment. The cost per acre foot saved over the 3-year project program is $209, the public sector cost. If I were to compare that with any other water system, augmentation would be about 3,000, or desalinization would be about 3,000. So it's 1/15 of the cost of any other solution that we have. In addition, we're doing this because we don't want to solve a crisis, a one-year crisis, and create a generational program. We're working with scientists to make sure the soil remains healthy, the crop yields continue to go up, and so we're seeing that. In addition, we put a lot of money into the research, so we're working to compare systems side by side, work with growers to introduce more crops like Waiuli. I even have a patent on a new nozzle. We've educated, working with the Farm Bureau and agribusiness, over 2,000 farmers, farm workers, and irrigation professionals to do their job better. So basically, for a very small amount, we are saving a lot of water. The last thing I'll just point out on this investment in agriculture and in our communities is helping our cities, because what we've done in Pinal County, where we've saved the number of farms, is you're reducing the PM10, the dust issues that we in the cities face, you're mitigating the heat island effect, and you're keeping the cost for our middle class of milk and eggs and steak low. So all of this is really Arizona working together, not cities versus rural, but all of us, keeping the cost of product low and our cities livable.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Kumbaya.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Oh, can I ask a question? Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Orr. Can you talk about, and I mean, ensuring the future of our water is going to take a lot of different things, and I think that this is one of them, but can you compare the cost savings, the cost of saving water with this compared to, let's say, conservation in a city removing turf, for example?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Fernandez, I think the numbers speak for themselves.
Excellent.
I will say, and I will sing Kumbaya on this, our cost per acre foot saved is $209 over the 3-year program. I would ask any program to match that. I know some of our urban investments are astronomically high. I also would argue that if you were to do turf removal, are you dealing with potable water, or are you dealing with recycled water? Are you creating PFAS and heat island effects with those things? The Pareto principle, because most of the water is used by agriculture, most of the savings will be generated by investing in agriculture.
Excellent, thank you. Perhaps you could go offline for a few hours and expound on that.
Oh, Mr. Chair, I have a quick question for
Yeah.
Dr. Orr. Thank,
Yes, go ahead.
okay, thank you. Dr., great to see you. Of course,
Thank
you
you,
know,
Senator.
you presented in committee, was glad to hear this in the NRU committee. Always excited to hear about the incredible savings and the efforts that our farmers are doing with help with these types of programs. I just wanted to ask, is this a voluntary program, or are the farmers mandated to do this?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kerr, this is completely voluntary. We do not deal with issues of water rights. The rights remained and should with the grower. every participant in this works with us. No one is mandated to do this. And frankly, this is a policy tool that is less severe and draconian than, say, an AMA. This gives us a policy tool to address our basin depletion.
Thank
Okay.
you. And Mr. Chair,
yes.
just briefly, I just want
Yeah,
to.
take your time.
Wanted to say or ask that because so often I hear, here in this place and from others that we have to mandate the farmers to do the right thing. And we've been doing the right thing since the onset of farming. And so I just wanted to highlight, this is all voluntary, incredible program, incredible investment, and we don't need mandates to save this kind of water.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Should this program become mandatory, we'll use less lethal weapons. So,
Thank you.
Senator Kern.
One laugh out of that.
You have a fan
got
out
one
there.
laugh out of that. Very good. Mr. Chairman, just real quick. So
Yes, sir.
what makes you feel better, doctor, the title of doctor, or representative?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kern, I would be representative is something that I aspired to all my life, and it's something that means a great deal to me. And with all due respect to my current profession, I think I learned more in 2 weeks in the House than my entire doctorate
Yeah.
program,
There you
even
go.
though
Okay.
it was.
Yeah, well,
So I,
Wasn't
I-
the answer I was looking for.
I'm going to
Well, you're
assume
good,
your
you're good, you're
doctorate's
good.
not in abnormal psychology then.
It actually isn't behavioral health. But one thing, if I could, Mr. Chairman, to Senator Kerr's point, that 42% has come from farmers matching public sector money and investing in themselves. So farmers and the private sector believe in this program.
Okay. So we have
Ryla Robinson.
Ryla here? No? Okay.
Okay.
Let's move the bill.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, over HB 2024 with two pass recommendation.
Okay, Secretary of the Roll.
Senator Alston?
Pass.
Senator Bennett?
Aye.
Senator Diaz? Pass. Senator Farnsworth?
Aye.
Senator Fernandez?
Aye.
Senator Kern?
Pass.
Senator Kerr?
Aye.
Senator Mendez?
Mr. Chairman.
You may.
Members, for the last 60 years, Arizona has lived under a single-party rule here at the legislature. Our state's budget, revenue streams, and the lack of a surplus is a direct result of a single-party budgeting away our public resources, which is sad because in this case, on this bill, I desperately agree that we need more funding to find more efficient uses for our limited water. This would be a great infrastructure investment with all kinds of dividends. But I cannot in good conscience vote and give our state more false hope that their needs will be met when this body when this body just keeps refusing to raise revenue and do our job to support this state. So I have to vote no.
Senator Alston?
No.
Senator Diaz? Nay. Senator Kern?
An enthusiastic yes.
Senator Hoffman?
No.
Senator Caput?
Aye.
6 ayes, 4 noes, 0 not voting.
Members, by your vote of 6 ayes, 4 noes, and 0 not voting, you have given House Bill 2024 a due pass recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and that 6-4 is not the usual mix, which is interesting. All right, we have
I won't tell Governor Napolitano that you thought she and I were from the same party. One.
Representative Biasucci, 2278.
You're here.
Mr. Chair and members, House Bill 2278 allows monies in the Gang and Immigration Intelligence Team Enforcement, or GITEM fund, to be used to prosecute human smuggling and immigration enforcement. The bill appropriates $2 million in FY 25 and 26 from the Consumer Remediation Subaccount to the GITEM fund, and subsequently appropriates both of these $2 million allocations to DPS to establish and maintain a Southern Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? None. Sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. They'll be quick. ACTIC is currently a system that exists here in Phoenix. It's a center where our law enforcement can come together for anti-terrorism reasons. So you have everybody from FBI to local law enforcement to CIA. Everybody's involved. And really what it is, it's a center where everybody shares information about any terrorism threats, human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug trafficking. But what makes sense is if this was actually a center at the southern border. Having it in Phoenix is great, but when you have main our main issues occurring at the border would have to do with any kind of terrorism, trafficking. You probably want to have a center on the southern border where they can all communicate with each other down there. All this bill does is it allows them to create this at the southern border so that we can actually have our law enforcement go to one centralized center to communicate with each other with the crimes that are occurring on the border. So it's a huge, huge success right now, the one that occurs in Phoenix, and hopefully you can support this. I know it's a budget negotiation, and we'll deal with that later. I'll see where the money comes from, but I think we can all agree the more protections we have on the southern border, the better we are as a state and as a country. So we'll love your support.
Okay, questions for the sponsor? Yes, Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, what was the stakeholder process like? Did you reach out to the Attorney General's office?
We did. Senator Mendez, Mr. Chairman, spoke to the Attorney General's office because we talked about the funding part. So I know there's some questions about that, which what I told them the same thing that I'll tell you today. Like, we're going to find the funding. If it can't come from there, that's not a problem. We're going to find it somewhere else. So we're good with that. They agree that this is a great, the purpose of the bill is a good bill, right? They agree on the idea behind the bill. But where we get the money from, we'll figure that out in negotiations. If that's not a path, we'll look elsewhere. But I think the most important part is let's get some kind of services down south at the border.
Link for that? Yeah, all right.
There's nobody here to speak.
Yeah, all of the people involved with this program can't be seen in public, so there's nobody here to speak. So let's move the bill.
Mr. Chair, real quick for the bill sponsor.
Sponsor.
Yes. Question.
Question.
Mr. Majority Leader, the sheriffs, are they signed in supportive, not supportive, neutral?
Actually, nobody, nobody's realized.
I would assume they'd be supportive because they utilize the Actic Center that's here in Phoenix. So this is just opening one up in the south part of the
Wait a minute,
state.
I think I found it. Hold on. 2278, RTS build positions. Oh, there we go. Yeah, the sheriff's, I got the Sheriff's Association is signed in.
That's 4.
I see a lot of private names, but they have the Association of Counties, the Sheriff's Association is signed in. Yeah, and a number of, against the mafia and a number of drug cartels.
Where's the Sierra Club on this?
They haven't signed in, apparently.
No.
It's shocked that the mafia is against this since being Italian. I'm very disappointed, but.
Mr. Chairman, I move
Sometimes
HB
families can't
2278
agree.
with due pass record.
Okay, Secretary, call the roll.
Family feud.
Senator Alston?
No.
Senator Bennett?
Aye.
Senator Diaz? No. Senator Farnsworth?
Aye.
Senator Fernandez?
No.
Senator Kern?
Aye.
Senator Kerr?
Aye.
Senator Mendez?
No.
Senator Hoffman?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So, Mr. Majority Leader, I don't love the idea that we're pulling $2 million out of the fund that would otherwise go to to our local sheriffs for actual enforcement. I get the point that you're trying to make here. I'll give you a yes, but I don't love it. So
We'll find
I'm in the cage, so I may advocate against it.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Aye.
6 ayes, 4 noes.
Members, by a vote of 6 ayes, 1 cheating, 4 noes, and no not voting, you have given HB 2278 due pass.
Thank you.
Any other reps here? Rest are a bunch of orphan bills? Okay. 2177.
Mr. Chair and members, beginning July 1, 2025, House Bill 2177 requires a hearing to terminate parental rights to be tried by a jury if a parent files a written request for a jury before or at the time of the initial termination hearing. Notice of the jury trial option must be included in the notice of the initial hearing, and only one jury trial need be held if multiple requests are received for a single case. A jury trial would have to be commenced within 120 days after the initial termination hearing, and the number of jurors and the required concurrence for a decision are required to be consistent with parameters established in the statute. Finally, the Administrative Office of the Courts would be required to submit a report to the legislature containing outlined data, including the number of jury trials requested and completed, as well as the outcome of the jury trials compared to the outcome of bench trials for these cases. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff? No sponsor? Elise Kulik, AZ Judicial Council.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, Elise Kulik here on behalf of
wait.
the Arizona Judicial Council in respectful opposition to the bill. So the courts are concerned about the cost and the resources needed to implement this legislation. Last year's version of this same bill included a $15 million appropriation. This year's bill has none. Jury trials are more expensive to run than bench trials. The courts would need the funding for juror compensation, court and clerk staff, as well as the construction cost to physically build out jury boxes in juvenile courts. We estimate these items will cost around $16.8 million. In 2003 to 2005, when Arizona piloted jury trials for this case type, we found that juries terminated parental rights just about as frequently as judges did. And out of the 310 juries requested by parents, only 34 trials actually went to a jury. The problem there is that even if the number of trials are relatively few, we end up wasting court resources and potentially jurors' time to prepare for jury trials, even when the case gets resolved elsewhere. So this was a very resource-intensive process to arrive at the same result. The legislature has a choice to make about whether to bring back these trials. If you do choose to bring them back, though, we ask that you please provide the courts with the resources to implement them successfully. And because this bill does not have those resources, we respectfully ask for your no vote. I'd be happy to take questions.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
You said that they reached the same outcome just about nearly as much. There was a few qualifiers in that sentence. What were the actual percentages?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Hoffman, it was 88% versus 92%. So.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Your estimate is 34 jury trials. Do you still want to stand by the $16.8 million to conduct 34 trials?
Mr. Chair.
It's a lot of staff.
Mr. Chair, a lot of that cost also comes from the construction space, but in general, we still need to be preparing for these trials, even if they don't all go to a trial.
Each trial getting their own courtroom?
Yeah, they need a new building for each one.
Nice.
Okay.
Jacob Ebden.
Next, thank
Oh,
you.
I do have a question, Ms. Kulik. Ms. Kulik, is there any other mechanism in court procedures that would allow a trial or the hearing for a termination of parental rights to end up in a jury?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Bennett, no, not currently.
Not
So
currently.
Arizona piloted it, and then I did a quick little survey too. It looks like about 5 other states, only 5 out of the 50 allow jury trials in this case type.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jacob, you're up.
Good afternoon, Chairman Kavanaugh, Vice Chairman Hoffman, and members of the committee. My name is Jacob Emnett, and I'm here on behalf of the County Supervisors Association in respectful opposition to HB 2177. Despite having little to no policymaking authority in the system, Arizona's counties provide a significant and growing proportion of funding for the state's courts. The association has no position on whether parents should have the ability to request a jury trial for the termination of parental rights proceedings, but it does have significant concerns with, and is in respectful opposition to, HB 2177's failure to fund these processes. The bill's fiscal note suggests that this bill could cost anywhere from $4.2 million to $9.8 million annually, with an additional $6.4 million in one-time costs. Without a state appropriation or a related increase in the court's appropriations, we believe that the counties will be on the hook for these costs. We can assume we'll be on the hook because case law has proven that courts have a right to reasonable costs, and when the state doesn't provide an appropriation or an increase to the court's budget, the pressure will inevitably fall on the county taxpayer. We are the payer of last resort. From FY 2000 to FY 2022, counties have seen their funding for the Superior and Justice Courts combined rise from 60 to 75% of those courts' total costs. I think that is about $504 million. Rather than continue this trend, we'd respectfully request that the state appropriate sufficient monies to fund the policy changes it would require for its courts. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any respectful questions for the county? No?
We got
Okay.
one more.
One more, thank you.
Is Amber here? Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I want to really thank you so much for hearing this bill. This is a bill I've worked on with Representative Kevin Payne for 2 years. And this bill is about due process, and our Constitution gives us the right to be tried by a jury. And that is not being done in family court, so families' rights are being violated. So it's as it stands right now, I just said the family rights are being violated. Currently in family courts, the majority of the cases are bench trials. And if you're a parent, and the only thing that would rock your world more than your child being taken from your home is the death of your child. So this bill ensures that if a parent is about to lose their child, the trial will be taken place by a jury to protect the rights of the families. The late Senator Nancy Schaefer of Georgia did an extensive research on the subject, especially with DCS. And in her report, she begins with a family who didn't know their rights, and their mother was told to sign a piece of paper that she wanted to see her, because if she wanted to see her children again, she had to sign this piece of paper, not knowing that she was giving her rights up to her children. The children didn't go to next of kin, their grandmother. They went into the system, and I encourage all of you to read the late Senator Nancy Schaefer's report, and I sent it via email to you all. I'll be up against lobbyists who claim that it's too expensive to uphold people's rights to be tried by a jury in family court. I have highlighted some articles in your emails that I've been collecting in regard to children in DCS, and you will find that more children are being taken out of the home and placed into state custody. I would ask you, with the rising amount of children being taken out of the home each year, what would be cheaper, to have a trial by jury or to continue to pay for the care of the children until they age out of the system? You will also see in the email that the DCS workers call themselves here in Arizona legal kidnappers. Senator Nancy Schaefer said in her report, this is not to say that there are not those children who need to be removed from wretched situations needing protection. This report is concerned with children and parents caught up in the legal kidnapping, ineffective policies, and DCS who does not remove a child or children when a child is enduring torment and abuse. I'm a law enforcement wife, and I know that to be true. Talking to my husband when he has rolled up on some cases in DCS has not removed kids that needed to be removed and are called and try to remove kids that should not be removed from the home. So as DCS workers call themselves legal kidnappers, you will find in Senator Nancy Schaefer's report that removing kids from a home has turned into a money-making machine. Can I just finish this thought? Real quick. The Child Protective Service and juvenile court can always hide behind the confidentiality clause in order to protect their decision and keep funds flowing. There should be open records, but there's a lot of people getting paid here, and it's state employees, lawyers, court investigators, court personnel, judges, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, caseworkers, therapists, foster parents, and social workers, and they're all banking on the fact that they need children in the system to be making money for themselves.
Okay, any questions? No, thank you.
Great job.
Okay.
She's my constituent.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move HB 2177 with due pass recommendation.
Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Alston?
No.
Senator Bennett?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to explain my
You
vote.
may.
I will support the bill to get out of committee, but I do consider this a money bill, and it needs to go into the discussion of the budget, because otherwise it's an unfunded mandate on the courts and the counties, and I will not support that, but for now I'll support it to get in the box and fight for money that we don't have.
Senator Diaz? Nay. Senator Farnsworth?
Mr. Chairman, may I
You may.
explain my vote? As I mentioned in caucus this morning, 4 or 5 years ago, Justice Bullock stated in a minority report that when DCS goes to court to terminate parental rights, parents lose 99.7% of the time. And I don't suppose that's changed very much. I have discussed it with DCS. I'm meeting with DCS every Thursday morning. And I will remind each of us that DCS has a annual budget of over $1.2 billion, which equates to over $100,000 per year per child. And incidentally, as I'm digging into the costs where DCS is spending their money, I found out the largest cost to DCS is subsidy to adoptive parents, which was quite surprising to me, because I thought when you adopted a child, you took on the responsibility. So thus, supporting the concept of keeping children in the system equates to a lot of dollars, so I'm trying to do that, follow the money. And with that, I vote aye.
Senator Fernandez,
Pass.
Senator Kern,
Pass.
Senator Curry,
Aye.
Senator Mendez,
No.
Senator Fernandez,
No.
Senator Kern.
Yeah, just permission to explain my vote real quick. Just want to thank Amber for coming down. Appreciate you. I know this is in your wheelhouse, and anytime, in my opinion, anytime we can put kids back with their parents, I think parents have a right to a jury trial. The system is not in favor of the parents in putting the kids back together. You know, the unfunded mandates, everything we try to do down here, it's always unfunded. Oh my God, the sky's falling. We can't do it because when I bet you if we did a real good audit in the court system or any one of our state agencies, we could find lots of money. There was a 14.2 million slush fund that the nurses had. That's one of many funds that are out there that we could easily fund if needed, but I would actually want to go in and do a deep dive on how much money they actually need, the court system. So with that, I absolutely vote yes.
Senator Hall,
It'll be a long 5 minutes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
All right. Oh, actually, before that, just quickly, I'm a little, the money issue obviously is there, and this is a tough year, but I'm a little concerned with the idea that it costs too much money to give people jury trials.
Right.
And I'm also a little concerned about the idea that because the outcomes in a study were the same in terms of, 90 removal, 10 not, that doesn't mean that each case would come out the same way. You could have a jurisdiction where in the bench trial, it was half and half, right? And then, but if you put the same cases to a jury trial, that doesn't mean that the half that were terminated would still be terminated by a jury, and the same with the other. You could literally have a total reversal and still have those same 50-50 figures. So I'm not really that persuaded by that statistic, but so I vote aye.
6 ayes, 4 no, 0 not voting.
In favor of 6 ayes, 4 nays, 0 not voting. You have given HB 2177 a due pass recommendation. 2743.
Mr. Chairman, members, House Bill 2743 appropriates $400,000 from the Victim Compensation and Assistance Fund FY25 to the Address Confidentiality Program Fund. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No questions? Okay. One speaker, all right. Speak or forever hold your peace.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, George Diaz representing the Secretary of State's office. Thank you for hearing the bill. The Address Confidentiality Program, or ACP, was authorized in state statute in 2011, and there are 26 other states with similar programs. The ACP currently serves more than 2,500 victims of domestic violence and stalking in more than 1,000 different homes by providing them an alternative address and by forwarding participants their mail, which on average is about 12,000 pieces of mail per month. The need for the funding in 2743 is because of the loss of Victims of Crime Act grants that have been sustaining ACP over the last few years.
Okay, any questions? None. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move the bill.
Which one?
2743.
Mr. Chairman, I move HB 2743 with due pass recommendation.
Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Alston?
Aye.
Senator Bennett?
Aye.
Senator Diaz? Aye. Senator Farnsworth?
Pass.
Senator Fernandez?
Aye.
Senator Kern?
Pass.
Senator Curry?
Aye.
Senator Mendez?
Yes.
Senator Farnsworth?
Nay.
Senator Kern?
I will go with nay.
Senator Hoffman?
Nay.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Aye.
7 ayes, 3 no, 0 not voting.
Madam, by your vote of 7 ayes, 3 no, 0 not voting, you've given House Bill 2743 a due pass recommendation. 2769.
Mr. Chair and members, House Bill 2769 appropriates $16 million from the Federal Child Care and Development Block Grant to the Department of Public Safety for grants to law enforcement agencies and nonprofits in Maricopa County for the purpose of constructing and improving child care facilities for children of law enforcement officers, as well as maintaining and operating child care programs for these children. The bill specifies how DPS is to prioritize allocations of grant monies and requires entities that receive monies to submit to quarterly audits to ensure monies are being used for specified purposes. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? None? Okay. We have a
bunch to speak.
Okay.
All right, let's start with Mark Cardenas.
Chairman Kavanaugh, honorable members of the Senate Appropriations Committee, I'll make it quick. I know you've had a long day. House Bill 2769 would enable officers to work the long shifts, do overtime, and allow personnel to stay on the job. An additional advantage of this legislation is that working parents can focus better on their work without the stress of having to deal with babysitting or worry that their children aren't well cared for. Currently, throughout the state of Arizona, we have hundreds of law enforcement positions that have remained open, and our agencies are unable to fill them. Even in the city of Phoenix, we have 500 positions that are still open in spite of a recent increase in pay for new officers. And lastly, according to the executive director of the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives, Kim Craven, the need for child care support is a frequently recurring topic at their roundtable meetings. There's no question that this is a priority. It has come up in every single focus group that we've done. There is a strong sentiment that things have to change to allow it. Humbly asking for your support for this legislation. And Chairman Kavanaugh, we have a female police officer who can testify that the benefits of this legislation would bring for her and her family.
We'll get to her. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right, Barbie Prinster. Apologize if I messed up that last name.
Hi, Chairman Kavanaugh and members of the committee. My name is Barbie Prinster. I'm the Executive Director of the Arizona Early Childhood Education Association. We're a trade association. I represent private licensed child care centers across the state of Arizona. First off, I really want to thank Representative Livingston for this bill because it does acknowledge the fact that we are short in slots for families and for children across the state, especially for infants and toddlers. And all shift workers, not just police officers. We're talking casino workers, restaurant workers, people that work at QT. We're talking about hospitals, EMS staff, and on and on. However, appropriating $16 million of federal child care and development funding is not the answer. That really equates to about 1,000 children that are currently being served in low-income working families that stand to lose their child care if this is appropriated. While federal funds cannot be used for major construction and other items that is talked about in this bill, I know DES can speak on the technical aspects of that, but we really need to focus on building supply across the state of Arizona. As evidenced by the recent child care infrastructure grants that were used with ARPA funding, it was able to enhance 511 facilities that were recipients of this infrastructure grant. And we would invite all of you to come and visit any one of those facilities across the state to see what is possible when we include private and public funding. This type of site-specific care is not going to solve the problem for police officers when we have a lack of overall supply to meet the child care needs for officers both middle and outside of the Phoenix area. The bill does state that it's for Maricopa County only and for cities that are over 3 million people, and so that is specific to Phoenix. So this is not going to help officers that are in Yuma. This is not going to help officers that are in Prescott. This is probably not going to help officers that are in Surprise because it's too far to take your child to site-specific care. Arizona is in a situation where we will have a child care waiting list and reduced quality care options for working families due to the lack of state investment in child care. Police officers who need access to child care subsidy can absolutely apply now, as long as they are less than 165% of the federal poverty level. It should be noted that the starting salary of a training officer in the city of Phoenix is $70,138.
Barbara, can you go ahead and wrap up for us?
Pardon me?
Can you go ahead and wrap up for us?
Yes.
Thanks.
So I would urge the bill sponsor and those in favor of this bill to rethink this opportunity, join us for advocating in the $100 million ask in the governor's budget for childcare, and continue to advocate for additional sustainable funding that includes infrastructure to work on the affordability and accessibility statewide and not a one-site-fits-all approach. Thank you.
All right.
I have a question, though.
Yes.
Did you, what was the last name? Pinster?
Prinster.
Prinster, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Ms. Prinster, did I hear you say that if we took this $16 million out of the CC, Child Care and Development Fund, that would eliminate slots for 1,000 children that are otherwise
Approximately
receiving funds?
1,000, yes, approximately 1,000. DES has asked for $91 million in appropriations for CCDF in this year's budget. Taking $16 million out of that $91 million will affect, in effect, we would lose about 1,000 children out of low-income working family care.
To that point, that's assuming that we appropriated that money, right?
It's federal funding, so it's been appropriated ever since it's been,
there.
in the last 5-6 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Savannah Knipp. Try to get a K and an N.
Yeah, that's
there
right.
For you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Appropriation Committee, I'm here to testify in support of this bill. For the record, my name is Savannah Knipp, and I just recently left the Phoenix Police Department after 6 years of service. I first started my career in patrol and then became a community action officer and eventually worked alongside of detectives. I was well on my path of establishing my career. As my husband and I, who is also a Phoenix police officer, started our family, we began to experience several childcare issues. We did everything we could to make it work, including working opposite days and shifts and even exchanging our kids in precinct parking lots. Not only is it difficult to find reliable, trustworthy childcare, but the demands and various shifts of the job can make it nearly impossible. During my time at the police department, I have spoken to several female officers that have had to make the same difficult decision to leave a job they love because of these similar childcare issues. Had we been presented with childcare or the ability to work part-time, we could still be protecting and serving the community today. I believe if this bill were to pass, that retention in the police department would vastly increase. I also believe that this is a great incentive for new recruits as well as single mothers and single fathers. It would be a secure feeling to work for a police department that not only values you, but also values your family. This job can be stressful, so having the added bonus of knowing that your children are safe and well taken care of would bring much needed peace. Thank you for your time and consideration on this important matter. I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? No, well, good, thank you.
All right, Amber. Amber's back up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for hearing this bill because it is important. I am a law enforcement officer's wife and I do have young kids, and she is right when she said the hours are insane. You might not even, my husband has not come home sometimes for over 24 hours working on a case. Crime doesn't stop just because of a certain time on the clock, and it makes it very stressful for working parents to try and figure out how they're going to take care of the kids. On top of that, law enforcement safety is something of the utmost importance. Us as law enforcement families do not tell other people in the public that we are law enforcement families because we are often the target to get to our husbands who have arrested really bad felons. For example, I used to be a radio broadcaster here in Phoenix, and there was a top-level guy that my husband had arrested years ago who ended up being in an apartment complex right next to my work, and they thought I was a target to get to my husband as retribution. So having a safe place where we know our kids are safe while we have to work is of the utmost importance because us as wives and kids are the target to get to our husbands. So please be in favor of this because the hours are crazy. They work weekends, days, nights, it doesn't matter. Crime doesn't stop just because, there's a holiday or it's 5 o'clock somewhere. And so I can't even stress to you how much our lives are impacted just because of the amount of crime that's increasing here in Arizona, especially with the border issue. So please vote yes on this bill.
Jim Norton. Is Jim here? I don't see him. Okay, Joe Clore.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Joe Clore, Executive Director of the Arizona Police Association. I'd like to kind of give you a little background on how this bill came to be. There's a group called the National Law Enforcement Foundation. They actually are the ones that started this concept of providing specialized child care for law enforcement for first responders. They started in San Diego. They've got a facility going in there. They've also expanded to Idaho and I believe Missouri and maybe one other, but I can't remember the name. So they brought it here and said, would you be interested in this? We said, we think it sounds like a great idea. We all know the challenges that we're having with recruitment and retention. I think you heard some very real live impacts of that. We also feel that this would go a long ways to assist in trying to obtain the goal of 30 for 30, and that's 30% women in law enforcement by 2030. Even today, women still are primary caregivers for the family, for the children. And when you start out in law enforcement in these careers, you start out on the night shifts, 24 hours, and you need a place for your children to go. So I think this would solve that challenge. And we would ask that you support it, and I'll take any questions.
So why not go equal rights for women and make it 50 and 50?
Mr.
Any
Chair, I'm going to
questions?
leave that alone.
Yeah. Questions?
You're funny, apparently.
Yeah, we'll give you a frequent attendee ticket. You can get front row and whenever you want. Any questions? No?
That's all we got.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move HB 2769 with the due pass recommendation.
Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Alston?
No.
Senator Bennett?
Explain my vote quickly. I'm concerned about this might be taking monies away from others that are currently using it, but I'm compelled by the need in this community, and I'll vote aye for now. Continue to look at it as it goes forward.
Senator Diaz? Pass. Senator Farnsworth?
Pass.
Senator Fernandez?
Mr. Chairman.
You may.
Thank you. I disagree with anything that prioritizes one group over another. I think the problem with this is I can name 20 different groups that have a need for childcare, firefighters, border patrol, even you name it. And I think to say that one group should be prioritized, and especially one city be prioritized over everywhere else, especially when my cities will not be, I can't vote for this. No.
Senator Kern? Senator Kurt?
Mr. Chair, just briefly, if I may. You know, I have some concerns too with how limited it is, but my heart goes out for the need. I feel like it's a good start, but yeah, I'm a little bit torn by its narrowness, but I will be an aye today.
Senator Mendez?
No.
Senator Diaz? I'll be an aye for now. Senator Farnsworth?
Aye.
Senator Hoffman?
No.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Oh, aye.
Five ayes, 4 noes, 1 not voting.
Members, we have voted 5 ayes, 4 noes, 1 not voting. You have given House Bill 2769 a due pass recommendation. Or should I have said?
Is that it?
5 ayes, 4 noes, 1 for.
Yeah, I wish I'd been here.
Yes, that's it, right? Okay, we are adjourned.